Hello and welcome to Who's On Next, the only podcast that gives you sight beyond sight. Today I have with me a man who's had a reservoir consisting of shows such as My Little Pony, Beyblade Burst. He's done stuff for Marvel. It's Bill Newton.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
It is Bill Newton. I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing good, other than the last 15 minutes before we started the interview.
Technical difficulties.
Oh, no. So, for people who, for those that don't know, my microphone started acting really, really fucky right before we started. It sounded like a walkie-talkie, which is concerning me because now I'm thinking I'm going to need to get a new interface sometime soon.
Hunting down audio chain issues is my nightmare.
Well, because I'm paranoid because I don't want to get a new... if it's the cord or if it's the interface, and that's what scares me. Because I'm like...
I bought an entirely new interface because, it was almost... I bought an entirely new interface almost because I didn't want to hunt down what it could possibly have been. I think it was the audio interface. I'm 75% sure it was. But I just very much did not want to diagnose the I think it was like 4 or 5 steps of audio chain issue that it could have been. And I thought, no, this is not, I didn't become an engineer. That's not what I decided to do. So I fixed it with money.
Yeah, no, well, that's what scares me because interfaces are not cheap.
Oh, yeah.
That's what scares me.
No, they're not. They're not. And I justified it to myself by going, sure. That's a business expense. I can write part of that off, right?
No, because for those who are not audio savvy, an average interface goes for around $100. At least a decent one.
Easily, yes.
So I'm like, I don't have a lot of money right now.
No. And it's also it's never anything that you want to just, as much as you try to have, room on a credit card or a line of credit or some form of debt, you try to have some room for emergency business expenses. Oh, you never want to do it.
No, and I was unemployed for like half a year until like March, so I was bleeding money for like months.
Yeah, and then suddenly, of course, and that's when everything will go wrong.
I'm like, well, thank God it's going wrong after I have employment, but I still don't have a lot of money. So,
but it seems like we solved the problem. So you know what? No new audio interface for you.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood.
So hopefully that did solve the problem. So I guess to get this started, what is it that got you into voiceover?
I think it was probably, I was thinking about this earlier today. This will shock you. I prepared for this actually. So I think what really got me interested was hearing comedy radio shows. So I didn't grow up with them. I'm not that old. But there was a show out of the UK called The Goon Show, which was Peter Sellers.
That's a very unfortunate name now.
I know, yeah. It's definitely taken on a very, very different vibe. If you tried to make a show called that now, I think people would have wildly different expectations. But it was called The Goon Show, and it was Peter Sellers, Spike Milligan, and Harry Seacombe. Some of those names people might recognize. Legendary British comedians and entertainers, and they had a radio show that they would do, and it was just like collections of skits and characters and stuff that they would do, and it was all these funny voices, crazy voices, especially from Peter Sellers. And I remember listening to cassette tapes of those when I was a kid because my parents had grown up listening to those when they were young, and there were so there were like cassette tapes and even vinyl records of those shows. I still have a couple of the vinyl records somewhere. But I remember listening to those and thinking like, oh, what a magnificent, wonderful, silly, goofy adventure these people are having. And then finding out much later than that even that could be a job. I didn't think about it as a job right then. I was too young to sort of realize, oh, these people are like getting paid to do this. They went into a studio and they're getting paid by the BBC to put this show on. And I realized later you could do that. This was after I became a big fan of cartoons. And that's when I decided, oh, I think I might want to do that. I'd always wanted to act. I'd done theater, and I'd done, little bits and pieces of things here and there. But it was once it sort of dawned on me that you could actually do it as a career, or you could at least do part of it as a career, that's what I wanted to do.
That's so fascinating, because I actually had this like exact same conversation with the last person I interviewed, where they kind of said the same thing of like they didn't realize that voiceover could be a career. Which I always find it so fascinating how many times I see voice actors say that. Like they're just like, oh, I just never thought about that was a job, like kind of thing.
I think part of it literally is because when you're introduced to voice acting primarily is when you're a child. And so you understand that like something's happening, you're being entertained, right? But the difference between say a cartoon or a puppet show like the Muppets, for example, is you don't see the people doing the thing. When you watch like children's entertainment with people in it, you go like, oh, that's a person. That person is doing that thing. And you might even put together at a certain point, you might put it together and go like, oh, that's an actor or a performer doing the thing. But when it's voice, for a puppet or an animated project, you're not really seeing a person. You're just seeing the character, and you're just sort of being taken into that world. So I think it takes longer to put together that is a job. Like that's something that somebody got paid for, went into a studio and did, and all that sort of stuff. So I think it takes a little longer for you to really put together and go, oh, that's people doing that, and people make a living doing that. Huh, interesting.
Well, I think it's because as a young autistic boy, I used to watch behind the scenes stuff like all the time for movies. Like I was fascinated by that as a kid. Like I would watch behind the scenes stuff for Disney movies and like stuff like that. Or I remember Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network used to have these things where they would have like the artists like draw the characters, and I was just
talking about that this morning with my good friend, my colleague Ian Hanlon. We were talking about the behind the scenes bumpers that they would do on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon for the shows that were on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. And I distinctly remember one with Charlie Adler and the cast of Are Real Monsters. And they had like a little behind the scenes where they would talk about the show and their characters and do the voices. And I remember being fascinated by that, because that's where you sort of go, oh, it's people. It's people doing it.
Well, I remember because even when I was little, I would memorize names and credits. Like I would see names and I would attach the voice to the name. And I think I remember the first person I like memorized the name was Tom Kenny.
That's a good name to memorize.
That was and I don't even think it was SpongeBob. I mean, it might have been SpongeBob.
Oh, Tom Kenny's been around for ages.
Oh, I know, but I'm trying. From the thing I always remember, I think I just remember I had that moment where it clicked that I just memorized this name. I think it was Kids Next Door. And I remember I was like watching an episode of Kids Next Door, and I just remember seeing that name, Tom Kenny. And then I think I remembered that just stuck with me. And then I would watch other things and I would see that name, Tom Kenny, anytime I would watch the credits, and I'd just be like, man, he's in a lot of stuff. Like I would just remember
I remember
that
Tom
name.
Kenny from Mr. Show with Bob and David.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's where I remember Tom Kenny from. And then like obviously, hearing him later in a prolific number of cartoon voices, particularly SpongeBob, I was just I remember. So my point of reference is not like, oh, it's the voice of SpongeBob. I was like, oh, it's that guy from Mr. Show with Bob and David.
Oh, well, it was like I would do the same thing with movies, like celebrity names in animated movies. Like I remember Mulan. I would just be like, I would watch Mulan and I would just memorize all those names. And then I remember Shrek came out and I remembered like, oh, that's the guy from Mulan. Like doing Donkey. I would just like remember that
oh, Donkey,
name.
That's Dragon.
Yeah, I would just remember the name tied to the character. And then now I have this Rain Man autistic knowledge of people's names and their voices. And
yeah, so like your very specific like memory of Eddie Murphy is like quite just, it's skewed because you hadn't memorized, you know, Eddie Murphy from, you know, necessarily
I didn't know his
Beverly Hills
face.
Cop
I just
or,
knew
exactly,
I didn't
yeah.
know his face.
You
I
were
knew
just
his
like,
name.
exactly, yeah.
I knew his
You were
name,
like, oh,
and
yeah,
I knew
Mulan and Trek.
Yeah, I knew his name and I knew his voice, and that's what it was for a lot of my life. Was I would just watch credits for cartoons, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's Grey Delisle," and then I started picking up on how Grey Delisle sounded, and I could pick up her voice like really easily, and that was what it was with Tom Kenny and Richard Horvitz and Charlie Adler and Dee Baker.
I used to do that. I used to do that same thing. I used to do the same thing where I just be like, wait a second. I used to love playing a game at the movies, at the cinema, where it would be one of two games. If it was an animated project, like if it was an animated movie and we were watching the trailer, I would sit there with my friends and I would try to guess who it was. Because of that, you know, sort of that encyclopedic knowledge where you just go like, oh, I think I know who that is. That sounds like such and such. But I also used to, and this is such a weird thing, it's related to that, like, you know, just memorizing all sorts of stuff. I used to love being able to, within a couple of seconds, you know, the bumpers for the production company that would come up at the start of the movie or come up at the start of the trailer, like Dimension Films or New Line Cinema or whatever. Yeah. So those would come up, and within a couple of seconds, I'd be able to go like, up, that's Spyglass. Oh, that's Dimension. Dimension
you would make a game out of like the first.
Well,
I've seen people do that with like albums before. Like they memorize songs so well that they'll like play like the first second of the song, and they'll like try and see if they can guess what the song is.
Yeah,
on,
I'm
like,
really good at those
second.
sorts of games. I love that sort of stuff, and I would get really, really good at it. And so I think that would also tie into then, I would know voices so well that I'd be like, I think that's, you know, X, Y, Z, you know, I think that's that person. And then I would love it. I would feel like an incredible sense of accomplishment when I was proven right. And then I would feel great shame when I was wrong.
Oh, it's like, you're from Australia, correct?
I sure am.
Yes.
I'm from Melbourne.
Did you live in Australia, or did you like migrate? Like, did you migrate to Canada like from an early point in life, or was it like when you were
No, much later. So in my late 20s.
Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up there and was raised there for most of my life.
Yeah, because I don't know much about animation in Australia. Like, kind of eludes me. The only real like major voice actor I know in Australia is what's his name? He does like I remember he was Bullwinkle in like the Rocky and Bullwinkle movie. Keith Scott. I was trying to remember.
Oh, Keith Scott.
I know he's like the one really, really heavily recurring voice actor in Australia for like animation.
Really?
But I don't know a lot about I don't know about original programming in Australia for the most part. I think the only thing I know is Blinky Bill. That's like the only.
I was about to
I'm
say that's
of.
like I was about to say Blinky Bill is the one I remember growing up as a kid. So there was definitely that, which was all one voice. I don't remember the name of the performer.
Oh, that was Keith Scott.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so that makes there it is. So every voice was Keith Scott in that show, and I remember actually when I was first realizing that voice acting could be a thing and that it was a career that I wanted to pursue. Part of the moving to Canada initially was, well, can I do this in Australia? And the answer was no. So the answer was that like unless you were already Keith Scott, that's already taken, you don't get to do cartoons because we didn't make like whole cloth. We didn't make a lot of cartoons.
There's not a lot of original. There's not a lot of original.
There's a ton of post-production. Ton of post-production in Australia, and there is some that gets created, but what happens, so I was on a Cartoon Network show a number of years ago called Monster Beach, which was a co-production between Australia, Canada, and the United States, and it was created by an Australian artist, Patrick Crawley. So he created the show, and he designed all the characters, and it was originally a TV movie, and then he turned it into a series. And I was lucky enough to be on the series, directed by the aforementioned Charlie Adler. And it was created in Australia, produced in Australia, directed in America, and cast and co-production produced in Canada. So big, lots of moving parts put together. But I always used to joke to people that I had to leave Australia to then start to make a name for myself in Canada to be able to audition for and be cast in an Australian created show, because there just really wasn't anything in terms of original animation. Now, of course, there's Bluey now, but even still, that's something that is like so. It's so created by the creators. I know that sounds obvious, but the people that make the show are in the show. And then if you want to be on the show and you're not one of the people who made the show, you have to be a celebrity. And I'm not. So good friend of mine who was also in Monster Beach, Rove McManus, who's an Australian comedy legend. He was on Bluey for a couple of guest spots. But yeah, you don't just get to be on it. The last show that I remember auditioning for, and we're talking maybe 18 years ago. Actually, I'm going to try to look it up. It was called Dog Star.
Dog Star? Is it all one word or like two words?
Like Dog Star. One word, I believe. Dog Star Animation.
I was going to say, I found a band named Dog Star.
No, there we go. 2006. So that is, woof, that's 19 years ago. So that's the last show I remember auditioning for, being like an Australian original created program. And I didn't get it. And a buddy of mine got down to a bunch of callbacks, and he didn't eventually get it. And it was a bit unfortunate, because it was one of those shows where they went, oh, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put a bunch of radio host personalities in the show. So there were some comedians in there, like, you know, who had been around for a while, and that made sense because, you know, they're experienced performers, and putting comedians in things is often like a very good idea, but also it's quite easy to sort of just go like, well, you're used to kind of working on your feet, being funny, like, you know, you work with crowds and things like that, so this won't be a problem. It was when they went like, yeah, and the main characters and stuff are going to be hosts of the 5 o'clock drive time spot on the big radio station, and I was just like, and not a lot has changed. Instead of the radio 5 o'clock spot people, it's often a lot of like very big film and TV folks, which I will just say, like, I'm already sounding incredibly bitter, but what I will say is I never begrudge when a performer who is big for something else wants to do voice acting if it works. Like, if they do a good job, thumbs up. I don't really care.
I was going to say, I only really have issues with celebrity casting when it's clearly just the person is just being themselves. Like, didn't
exactly, and then it's just pure stunt casting. And sometimes even if they're just being themselves, that can work. But it does feel like, well, what are we doing here? Like, why did we do that?
Like, I think like Kung Fu Panda was like one of the first things that popped in my head. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody in that movie is very good. Everyone in that movie is very good, but the majority of them are just doing their voices. Like,
and that can still work because, like, they are. So, for example, Jack Black, and a lot of people would go like, "Oh, why Jack Black?" and all these things, and I was just like, well, if you've ever seen him perform on camera, he's doing the same thing. He's a hyper animated performer already, so that super works well for animation. So I have less of an issue with that than when you get examples of character, like performers that it's a thing that we talk about sometimes in various parts of the community, where it's like, if you're so used to doing film and TV acting, that's a very specific kind of acting. And like, you know, people should know that, you know, like, voice acting is not lesser, it's just a different thing. And you need to know that, like, hey, the thing that you could normally do where you might, like, you know, cock an eyebrow or smirk a certain way or just like have a very intense look on your face and in the eyes, You can't do that in animation.
Well, and some celebrities
it doesn't get picked up.
And some celebrities are very bad at voice acting.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So they're used to being able to transmit, like whatever they're trying to communicate in their acting, they're able to do it physically, whether it's with a look or they already look a certain way, which can lend itself to a performance. Absolutely. And that's just always been the case. However, if you're getting into the world of voice, every single part of what you used to do now has to be transmitted through the voice. And if you can't find a way to do that, it comes off so flat. Like, we all know examples. I'm not going to pull any up because I don't want to get myself burned. But there are just so many examples of where it's like, oh, okay, so this is somebody who is like, they're taking their time. They're really letting like big breaths and like, pauses and things like that. And sometimes the director of a project, if it's a big star, they don't feel like they can tell them, hey, I need you to speed up. Hey, I need you to like be faster. Hey, this is feeling a little flat. And it'll just come out that way. And then it sucks. And I feel bad actually for the performer because I'm just like, well, nobody felt like they had the courage to be able to say, hey, if you could just like give me 60% more. It really needs to come through how excited you are. And I can see it in your face, but like I'm not hearing it.
I've seen people even in live action with like bad acting where I remember somebody had said, in hindsight, what makes it more depressing is that was the best take.
Oh, like, always. Like, any form of like non-improv or non like, like on-stage theater production, when something comes off badly, yeah, you do sort of sit there and go like, well, depending on the like the tight shooting schedule, it's like that was the best one. That's the one that they thought was the best. Now, there are some cases where a production, like I've heard, like Clint Eastwood, for example, you get like 2 takes. That's it. It's just like, look, you're supposed to come prepared, or at least that's what he expects. He's just like, you should come prepared with what you're going to do, and we're going to do like 2 takes and we're going to move on. So you don't get unlimited takes. But in most cases, I'm just like, look, if you're not able to, with maybe 1 or 2 redirects, get to where we need to go, then we're in a tricky spot. Well,
or there's the Kubrick approach where he did like 40, 50 takes of like everything.
The
like,
Kubrick and the Fincher approach, where we go like, hey, look, I'm essentially shooting coverage of every shot.
Like I think about that bit in The Shining, because the story of like Scatman Crothers just walking to the door in the blizzard, like before he gets killed in The Shining. They shot that over 50 times. Just him going up to this door in the actual cold. And I remember there was like a story of him saying like, I did it like 20 times at that point, and then I said to Stanley Kubrick, what was wrong with that take? And he was like, oh, you walked a little to the left. You walked a little too far to the left.
I think we got it.
I'm like...
On the other side of that, I really love Werner Herzog's take on shooting film, and he's like, when I see new filmmakers, I despair because they are shooting hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage, and no, I have a very set idea of what I want it to be. I go and I shoot and I get what I want, and then that's it. I have maybe 6 hours of footage that I cut down for the film, and I think it's just wasteful. And it's always, I was like, yeah, like, everybody should be prepared from the very, very top down. I think the director and the DP and like everybody should be really prepared to do the thing. And if you get the luxury of practice or rehearsal or whatever, that's fantastic. But I think that's what separates professionals in all stripes of the entertainment industry, which is like, show up with a bunch of stuff ready to go, but also be so ready to throw all of that out and pivot. And that's what I think a lot of people get stuck on who come from different parts. Like, again, I'm not trying to, begrudge or shit on film and TV, but I think when people from film and TV who have lots and lots of time between setups and lots of time between takes and things like that to sort of like really mull it over in their head or discuss it with a director or something like that, where, you know, like when you are working in the studio in animation, it is go, 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 go. We might be doing multiple episodes a day. And so we are getting through, you know, like 30 pages of script, and we are going, and then we're going, and then we're going, and then we go back in and we get a couple of lines here and there. So you have to be, I love it. I truly love it. It's as close to like the sort of the frenetic energy of the theater as I've experienced, because you're just like, okay, we're going, and then we're going, like we're running all the way through, and then we might fix some, like tweak some little here and tweak some little there, but it's like bap, 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 bap. And that's sort of the thing that I see that a lot of people don't get, is they kind of get locked into the decision they were going to make, like, you know, maybe the choice they were going to make. And again, in film and TV, I think because there's so much time between setups, there's enough time to be like, okay, I did it that way, but, you know, I'm not really sure. I think maybe this time I sort of like, I'll do it, you know, maybe this way or that way. In voice, no, like we're getting this knocked out in, like, you know, 2 hours. So we don't have time. You better be able to just go bang, bang, bang.
Well, yeah, it's I always hear about, I very rarely hear about voice sessions going a ridiculously long time. Very, very rarely when I've interviewed people.
I've been hearing about it more lately, I will tell you. I never used to. And then I think, look, I got theories. I think that there are a lot of newer people who are being thrust into, and look, for whatever reason, I don't know. I'm not on the casting side of things, and I couldn't possibly try to. I think I'd go insane if I tried to understand it. But there's a lot of people who are newer to the industry who haven't got the experience. And this isn't their fault. I feel like this is on casting and production, is that they go, yes, but you're just right for what we need. And so here is a lead or supporting role. And they're not ready for it. And so that's when I hear lately of sessions starting to take way, way longer. And suddenly the pickup sessions, instead of being like, you know, oh, we've got 2 lines for you, Bill. And then, you know, like, Steve, we've got 1 for you. And then just like, you know, I just need a reaction here, like a running reaction, because we changed a bit of the animatic and it doesn't work now. So I just need to get you going like, and then that's it. And now we're going like, oh, okay, so we've got like, we need to redo this whole scene and that whole scene and like all that other stuff. And I think it's been happening more. And that's just because the way that it used to work was that, you know, there kind of was a journeyman system where, you know, newer folks got a little bit of experience in like this or that format, or like, and then moved up, and then were given, you know, supporting roles and leads and things like that. And by then, you've worked in the system, you've been in the rooms with other folks, you've seen how it works. And so it just becomes the day-to-day job. But you're right, it used to be, and like everybody was just like bang, bang, bang. Like if you had a 9 o'clock session for a like a 20-minute cartoon, I remember walking out of some of those at like 10:30. Like we were done. And then you got the whole rest of the day. And now you might have to come back after lunchtime.
Well, it's like I've heard like stories of people also who are just like, oh, you have to like balance specific things. I remember, I think like Fred Tatasciore had said like, oh, you do animated shows at like the beginning of the week, and then you do like video games at the end of the week, because you don't want to destroy your throat at the beginning of the week.
Well, especially like, for Fred. Like, I mean, especially for the stuff Fred's getting. But I mean, video games in general, yes, are just usually much more of a stressful performance. But Fred especially, when they're calling Fred in for video games, they're just like, hey, Fred, I'm going to need you to be this glass gargling monster in this video game, and I'm really going to need you to give me 150% effort on
Fred,
this.
I'm going to need Fred for 4 hours today. I'm going to need you to go
exactly. Yeah, 100%. And I mean, look, you know, it's also funny because you know, like the folks like Fred from that particular like cohort, that era, talking about going like, oh yeah, you would do your cartoons at the beginning of the week, and then you do your video games at the end of the week. And a lot of me and my colleagues, who we work fairly regularly, but hearing that, you go like, wow, you worked twice in 1 week?
Well,
that's just not how it is that much anymore.
I also don't really hear about video games in Canada very often. That's kind of I know that they do record video games in Canada, but like very, very rarely do I see
You'd be
voice work
surprised.
come out of, I guess, like a AAA game or something like that coming out of Canada.
Well, so Ubisoft's headquarters is Montreal.
Yeah.
And so
Though I
a
think
ton of, not always the lead, although the last, so Assassin's Creed Mirage was,
I know a lot of
lead
these.
was-
I know a lot of the Assassin's Creed games. I think are done in like Toronto or like they do a lot
Montreal.
yeah, I know. I think it's like kind of a
they'll
mix
cast out of
sometimes.
Toronto, they'll cast out of Vancouver, they'll cast all over the country, but the headquarters of the company is in Montreal. So sometimes they'll fly you out. So for example, for Assassin's Creed Mirage, Basim, the main character, was played by my good friend Lee Majdoub, who I've done podcasts and a couple of other things with, who is now most well known as Agent Stone in the Sonic films.
Oh shit!
Yeah, so he played Basim in the lead in Assassin's Creed Mirage, and they flew him, I believe, to Montreal to do all the recording, which there was a lot of when you're the lead of it. But yeah, I think Assassin's Creed Odyssey as well. I think the two leads were also Canadians. I'm not sure if both of them were. One of them was for sure. I don't know about both, but yeah.
I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that was
which Odyssey was the one.
Odyssey, yeah. I know that Michael Antonakis was one of the performers, and he's Canadian.
Yeah, he was secondary lead.
And then I forget the other. I forget the actress's name.
I'm gonna
Melissa.
I'm gonna butcher that. Melissanthi Mahout. Melissanthi Mahout. I was gonna say I'm gonna butcher that name.
Melissanth?
It's
Probably from Montreal. I would have to guess.
Yeah, she only has like 2 voiceover credits on BTVA from what I've seen.
She killed it. She was so good. Loved it. But yeah, so there's been I was also in what's it called? Avatar. So Avatar
that one that came out a couple years ago.
And they've done some DLC since, but yes, that one. So they've done some of that here, and then
I remember
they've done like
Starlink, that game that came out like 6 or 7 years ago. I know that was an entirely like Toronto-based cast.
Oh, okay. And also, Mass Effect. Both Shepards are Canadian performers.
Yeah, because it's
so like we pop up. We're here and there, but like what it is that it's basically big AAA companies tend to be headquartered often in the United States, but not always. And then they will sort of, spread their casting web a little wider. It's also changed a bit because they now are casting more authentically. And by that, I mean, especially for accents. So big, always useful, always wanted is the sort of the fantasy British accent. And it used to be that they would cast American performers and just go like, hey, you can do like a mid-Atlantic or a British accent, right? And people will be like, oh, yeah, totally, for sure. And you can see examples in some old games from, like the 2000s especially, where you go like, ooh, that is not any British accent I've ever heard. And now they just go straight to hiring equity performers from the UK. So we're all over the place, but yeah, there's only a couple of companies that have made their games like fully in Canada. It's funny if you look at the credits of a lot of a lot of video games, there will be some engagement with the Canadian entertainment industry. Now, sometimes it'll be VFX or post production, but a lot of the time it'll be like performer here, performer there.
Yeah, because I know the Far Cry games. I think the last few years have been predominantly.
Yeah. I've got a lot of friends who are on those. So we're around.
Well, I remember. I think like one of the first times I had seen one was Mega Man Powered Up, that like PSP game from like 2006. I don't know where that was. I know it was a Vancouver lead, but the rest of the cast I think were Toronto. I don't know
that does
where.
sometimes
I
happen.
don't know where it was though. Oh, Calgary. Okay, yeah, there it is.
That's interesting because that is not normally an entertainment hub.
It says Blue Water Studios, Calgary, based in Calgary and Edmonton.
Yeah, Edmonton makes sense because that's where BioWare is. There's a bunch of tech and a bunch of video game stuff in Edmonton. There's actually a ton of indie game stuff in British Columbia, where Vancouver is.
There's a lot of anime dubbing. I'm looking at this studio.
There is
a lot of anime dubbing. Looking at this Blue Water Studio, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Well, I know Ocean was like the big one for Vancouver.
Yeah, I've worked with them many times. Worked with them just earlier this year and last year.
Oh, I remember. I thought that Ocean like rebranded or went like defunct or something like several years ago.
No.
I don't know where
Still
I heard.
kicking.
I don't know where I heard that, but I swear like 6 or 7 years ago I heard something.
I saw somebody
like
post about
rebranded.
that. I saw somebody post a while back, and we all talked about it here because we were just like, oh, it was somebody who had quite a following, and they said like, oh, I miss the days when anime used to be made at Ocean in Vancouver, and all of us were just like, what are you talking about?
I was
in last month.
It wasn't
it's
even
still going.
I don't even think it was that. I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago. I thought I had like read something that said like Ocean had like rebranded or it like split off into like 2 different companies or something like that. So I thought it was like Ocean like as a solo brand didn't exist and it had like split off into 2 different groups is what I thought I had read.
No, that's so rude. That's misinformation. Don't believe the hype.
Oh no, I'm not saying I believe that anymore. I know it does exist now, but I think for like several years I just thought that was the case because I just remember
I think people did. I think it was one of those things where like a whisper went around the world and like people just went like, oh yeah, that sounds right. So like for example, Dead Demons Destruction was a fantastic anime that all of us here in town worked on. I think we recorded 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and it came out late last year. But it was very critically well received. It's on Crunchyroll right now. It's got one of those classic anime titles where it's 15 words.
If you had a stutter, that'd be like the worst name on the planet.
Yeah, it would sound like you were actually saying the thing correctly. You'd be like, oh yeah, totally. Or you'd be like, oh, it's a couple more. Yeah, get Bob Bergen on here. And Bob, say the name of this show. But that was a really, really cool show, like really well made, really, really fantastic performances, even if I do say so myself. So yeah, like we're still making like really good stuff at Ocean.
It's actually, it's funny because I remember I had brought up the Australia thing before. Because when I do research for these things, I try to have like a pretty decent understanding of the person's like work when I try to interview people. Like, I don't try to go for people I'm like, oh, I know them for one thing. I'll get them. Right. Like, I know them for the one thing. We can talk about that one thing for like 45
You're lucky because
minutes.
I don't really even have like a one thing. Like I joke with my colleagues and friends in town. I say like I'm king of the like one shots where it'll be like I'll show up and I'll be 1 or 2 characters for a couple of episodes and then like mist in the night, I'm gone, and then I'll show up again maybe later or something here or there. In fact, the only time I've been on more than a handful of episodes was Dead Demons and Monster Beach.
Well, My Little Pony, you were a few characters too.
I was, but every single one of those characters only had 1 episode. The only reason that Pony of Shadows on My Little Pony had two episodes is because it's literally an evil laugh at the end of the first part of the 2-parter, and then in the second episode is where I have all my actual lines, and we just recorded that all on the same day. But so that's technically 2 episodes, but I think I'm 5 or 6 characters in that show, and every single one of them is 1 episode.
I think it's also the fact that you play like a very iconic one-off with Applejack's dad.
Yeah, exactly. I played a bunch of like ones that had either been talked about or had been referenced to. So like Pony of Shadows and Bright Mac were characters that had been referenced multiple times, and then I came in to play them. And I'm very, very thankful for it and had a great time doing it. And I'm really glad that people enjoyed them too. But it was just very funny to me to be like, oh, so absolutely no chance of these characters coming back. And they were like, yeah, no, probably not.
Well, because it's funny because as I was saying, because I was trying when I try to interview somebody, I try to get like a decent knowledge of their stuff. Like I'll watch interviews or I'll like skim through their resume, like if I'm not aware of certain things. Or and it was really funny because this only yesterday. I had known about you for a long time, and we followed each other for like back on Twitter. And I had seen I had seen several things you'd worked on. I did not know you were Australian until yesterday.
Haha! Well, you know what? I'm happy. That makes me happy. It's a little. I tell people that it gives me a little thrill when sometimes like I'll audition for something and then I'll book the role and then I'll go in to record. So like whether it be a cartoon or a commercial or something like that, I'll book the job and then I'll go in and I'll just start talking to them in my regular speaking voice, which this is. And it makes me very happy when they either sound confused or look confused, like they're not sure if they accidentally booked the wrong person, and then we'll like roll into doing a couple of takes or whatever, and you can see them kind of visibly relax and go like, "Oh, okay, it is the guy." And that's because that's what I had always loved about voice acting, was that you could completely disappear into a character or an accent or whatever and just really explore it. And the more that I'm able to do it to where people aren't sure either that it's A, me, or B, what my actual accent is, that makes me very happy because it means that it was convincing enough that people were like, oh. Like I've always loved it when people haven't known that, you know, big famous British performers from say the 80s or the 90s who have then done American films or TV, and the American audience only knows them for the American show. I'm thinking specifically of Hugh Laurie.
I knew you were thinking Hugh Laurie because I was thinking Hugh Laurie when you said that.
And that happens a lot where they'll just be like, wait, like in an interview he'll be speaking and it'll be like, wait a second.
See, are
you telling me he's British?
What's so funny to me is I knew him as British before he was on House.
Oh, same. I knew him as a bit of Fry and Laurie. Like
I knew him from Blackadder.
Yeah. Fantastic. And so like I loved those shows. Growing up in Australia and Canada had the same experience, which is that, you know, the CBC here and the ABC in Australia, the Australian Broadcasting Company, was the government funded channel, and they would often buy like big blocks of syndicated television from the UK. And so we would get tons and tons of British shows. And so I grew up watching those, and, you know, like sort of, you know, working on British accents and things like that. And so I was super familiar with Hugh Laurie. So seeing him do House and then finding out that people didn't know, I was just like,
See, well, I mean, if I want to go back to when I first heard him, it was when I saw Stuart Little when I was a young boy. And he was doing an American accent there. But I remember when I was like 11 or 12, I watched Blackadder, and I was like, "Oh, that's the dad from Stuart Little." Like,
I had the one example I can remember of a reverse of that was Damian Lewis. Do you know Damian Lewis, the actor? So he was in Billions, but he was also in Band of Brothers. He played Captain Winters.
Yeah. I've seen this guy in a couple things.
I had never seen him in anything British. I'd only seen him in Band of Brothers to start with, and I was like, okay, American guy, got it. And then there was the Stephen King movie Dreamcatcher.
That's what I've seen him in, was Dreamcatcher, where he's doing like it sounds like a Rhys Darby impression.
Yeah,
like,
and he's doing a British voice and like sort of mocking it and going like, you know, oh, jolly pip pip cheerio sounds like James Bond.
Yeah, it sounds like Rhys Darby. Like anytime I listen to his voice.
And he talks about it in it like as the character, like when he's kind of losing his mind. And I was like, that's a really good British accent. Like, that's a better British accent than I usually ever hear American performers do. I'm curious. So I went and looked him up and I was just like, are you telling me he was British this whole time? which then made me appreciate his performance in Band of Brothers. I was just like, wow. Okay.
because I feel like I've had that a lot. Because I mean, it's like what was it the guy from Kick-Ass? I know was one. I think
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Yeah, everybody knows everybody saw Hugh Jackman in X-Men first, so everybody just assumed he was American until he like spoke in interviews, and everyone found out he was Australian.
There is one line in X-Men, the first one from 2000, where there's one line where he says it. I think it's when he's in the truck.
It comes out.
Really? Oh, it slips so much that, like, as an Australian watching it, I'd be like, wait a second, what? I think nobody really noticed because I haven't heard a ton of people go like, fake, gotcha. But watching it back, it's like, he might as well have just been going like, yeah, I'm Wolverine, mate.
Wolverine, fucking Wolverine.
Yeah, it was very funny. But yeah, Aaron Taylor Johnson from Kick-Ass, and then, you know, fantastic in Bullet Train recently, but being like extremely British in Bullet Train. It was just like, yeah, that's his normal voice.
I remember because I had gotten so used to. Well, I've always been curious how people feel about Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow. Because I always thought he sounded pretty good in that role, but I don't know how like British or not, like British or Australian.
Well, the trick of that one, like it seems it's pretty solid, but that's because it's this sort of, there's a little bit of a trick to it, which is that like the more that you slur it, you can kind of, it's fine. Because you can just talk like this, and then it's, you know, it doesn't matter too much if the voice is a little off, because it just sounds like maybe you're drunk.
What about? I'm curious about Sweeney Todd and Corpse Bride, because he's fully British in like both of those.
Not bad in Sweeney Todd.
I think Sweeney Todd. He's pretty good. Corpse Bride. I really like Corpse Bride, but I think he kind of goes in and out of it in Corpse Bride.
I haven't seen it recently enough to remember it. That was one that, like, I remember seeing like Nightmare on not Nightmare on Elm Street.
Well, he was in that.
I know that's why I was confusing them in my head. I'm just like, not that one. No. So Nightmare Before Christmas is when I was just like, oh heck yeah, anything Tim Burton produced, anything like animated, claymated, let's go. Corpse Bride slipped me by, and then I came back with like Coraline. But I haven't seen Corpse Bride as much as like a ton of other stuff. So I just the accent's not as present in my memory to think about it. But there's also another little thing about like Australian especially is I've never ever heard like a very good performance as an Australian accent by somebody who's not Australian.
Well, because
I've heard people who can say like one word or phrase, and that makes sense because like you can practice that really specifically, and then the minute you have to like slip into it,
there's a bit from Finding Nemo I like memorized as a kid, and I remember I had an Australian friend at one point, and she was like, "That sounds pretty good for the one line you did. That actually sounded pretty good." But
you know what? That actually brings us back to a very important thing for listeners, which I will say, which is that working on impressions and accents is fantastic. That's exactly how I got into what I do now, which is that I'm more of a utility player. I do lots of accents and characters and things like that. So working on them is really, really good. But you do have to press yourself outside of where you sit comfortably. So you can't just do the phrase. I've seen examples of people who will, unfortunately, in the professional space, kind of market themselves as just like, you know, chameleon, thousand voices, and anything you want,
and then they do Peter Griffin, like they do that.
I mean, it might be, but it might be a perfect Peter Griffin. But the thing is if your examples of those accents, voices, characters, whatever it is, if it's one line or one word or 5 seconds, I already know that it means that that's about all you're able to do. And then when you would be given a script, like if you auditioned or like, you know, marketed yourself,
could you do like a full paragraph as Peter Griffin?
100%. Could you do a paragraph? Yeah. Could you do a page of dialogue as this character without having again, because we talked earlier about how when you get in the booth, when you get into the studio, you don't have the luxury of 100 takes, which you do at home when you're practicing and like, you know, putting together a reel of some kind. It's some people, I think recently I've heard of production side of things where they've been burned because they've gotten stuff from newer people this is I'm shooting off on a million tangents, but this is often why I see, and people do complain, and look, I've complained as well, where the same people get the roles over and over and over again. And the reason is because production often gets really badly burned when a newer talent maybe sends an incredible audition, like an amazing audition, but gone are the days where you auditioned in person. That just doesn't really happen anymore. And what used to be able to happen when you auditioned in person was that you could do like your heavily practiced thing and they'd be like, wow, amazing. And then a good director would be like, could you try it without the accent? Or could you try it with this accent? Or like, what if you did it like 30% faster? Or like, what if you did it, with a slight lisp or something? And at first, when I first started, I thought that was directors like kind of being dicks and like, sort of like trying to trip me up. And the funny thing is that they sort of were, but not because they hate me. They're just like, I need to know you can do it. So if you can't take the direction or you can't like switch it, if you're too locked into what you're doing, that's not going to work for 20 episodes of a show. Like we can't afford to get 5 episodes in and realize, oh my God, we
made a horrible mistake.
We made a horrible mistake. And that's them sort of doing it. But we don't do that anymore. We don't like I can count on the one hand the number of callbacks I've had in the last 3 years. It's like 2.
Well, it's like I've heard this thing for years that I don't know if it was I think Funimation. I'd always heard this thing from Funimation where it was like, oh, Funimation always uses the same like 10, like the same 15 people, and they do that because they've been so reliable for like 20 years. Like,
partly yes. It's my understanding also that Funimation is like most of the productions they make are non-union, right?
Yeah.
So and that isn't to like me going like, union is just inherently better. But what will happen is that they will use the same people because at a certain point, people in the professional space of performing, whether it be for voice or whether it be for TV and film, at a certain point you kind of make the decision of like, it's time for me to step into like, the more professional, like career-minded space as opposed to just like, it's a bit of fun. I'm having a good time. And it means that you will seek to join the union, and that will mean that you can't then do the stuff anymore. So a lot of production houses, and that happens in Canada, it happens in the US, I've heard it happen in the UK as well, which is that they will kind of try to squeeze all of the juice out of someone as quickly as they can before that person either decides to ask for more money on a non-union contract or decides to move to wanting to join the union. But there is also the element, as you say, and this happens in the union space too, all the time, where they're just like, hey, we're really only, like, I will get auditions sometimes, this isn't me bragging, but I'll get auditions that will say, please only, like, it'll be copied from what they sent to my agent, and I'll say, please only send this to, like, your top 3 or 4 talent. Like, we really need, like, solid professionals for this. We don't want to be scouring through dozens and dozens of auditions that are just immediately wrong. We also need to know, again, because they've done away with callbacks and things like that, it's like we want to be able to just know that we can hire them and they'll get in the booth and they'll do the job. As opposed to, oh, gee, this is going to, this is going to take all day.
All right, yeah, because
which nobody wants.
Well, because that's not even in dubbing. I've seen that in California too. I remember literally talking to people who've worked in LA, and they have told me, I have known agencies or like studios, they will purposefully have a list of like 25 voice actors, and they will normally send all their auditions to those 25 voice actors, which is why you'll see the same like 15 people in like 5 cartoons in 1 year, basically. Yeah,
and that's sort of like, it's the reason also that, like throughout the history of entertainment, you would see the same actors showing up in multiple projects. It's, it's a combination of like, look, we're chasing audience buzz, which is less of a factor. I mean, it's funny, it's sort of a factor, but not. It didn't used to ever be a factor in voice acting because aside from, you know, like you and I, like big nerds for animation or voice acting in general, nobody knew who the heck like a Frank Welker was. I used to love saying like, you know, oh, do you know who Frank Welker is? They'd say like, you know, who's your biggest inspiration for what you're doing? And I would say Frank Welker. And they'd be like, who the heck is that? And I'd be like, oh, you don't know Frank Welker's name, but you definitely have heard Frank Welker.
It's like that. I always love that fun fact of saying at one point Frank Welker was like the most financially like, I think he had like technically like the actor who had made the most money just off of the amount of films he had been in, just from like the amount of big budget movies he'd worked on. Like,
sure, yeah, residual stuff like that.
Yeah, at one point Frank Welker was like the biggest, like I think they said he was technically the biggest box office draw in Hollywood because of the amount of big movies he'd been in over his career.
Well, yeah, because of the way they do that math, where they go like, you know, oh, the total number of things that Frank Welker has been in have grossed this much. And yeah, it's insane because like if they needed creatures or they needed animals, like if they needed, yeah, like fantasy or monstrous creatures or animals, they'd usually call Frank because he just had it still does have an uncanny ability to be able to do that. And so, yeah, he was just in a ton of stuff. But I would say like, you know, when people go like, oh, who's Frank Welker? And I'd be like, oh, he was Freddy from Scooby-Doo. He was Abu in Aladdin. And like, just like rattling off all those creatures. You can literally,
like Frank Welker, it's so funny. Frank Welker is like the one.
He was the lion noises in Lion King.
Yeah, there's a lot of people where you can rattle off like 10 or 15 characters. Frank Welker is so funny because you can rattle off like 50. Like 50 characters, and everybody would be like, oh, yeah, he did that. Oh, yeah, he did that. Oh, God, he did that. Like, yeah, no, like, it's so... Frank Welker's like the only living actor I can think of where you can just rattle off like 50 characters that somebody would probably have seen him in. Like,
yeah, and see, that used to be something that, like, you know, like I said, you know, folks like us would be very, very interested in that world, so we would absolutely know who that was. But the general public and even fans of various things, like fans of Scooby-Doo, didn't necessarily go like, oh yeah, Frank Welker, the voice of Freddy. They were like fans of the show. Now, and I think it's, you know, almost entirely because of the internet and then, you know, forums on the internet and, you know, communities and things like that, you will have so much more notoriety in the voiceover world. And that, I still don't quite know how to feel about that, because I think, I'll just say, like, what happens in my head when I think about it is I think that people's priorities and goals that they're seeking have changed a little, because when I got into the industry, there was never any chance that you were going to be famous for being a voice actor. Like, that just, it didn't exist then, and it you know, it was not even a possibility. You'd not be like, oh yes, I'll be the most famous voice actor. Now you sort of can, you know, there's people like a Troy Baker, like a Nolan North, like a Jen Hale, like all these people that have incredible careers, prolific careers, who they would have been very successful and are now because of their talent, but they're not, they would never have been famous before. And I think that newer folks, and this is not their fault, I'm not saying that they're all going like, yeah, I'm just here for the fame. That is now more of a consideration than it ever was. The same way that, like, you know, film was very glamorous and prestigious, but television wasn't. In fact, you'd have film stars that would not really want to do TV because they were like, well, no, I'm like a big glamorous film star. Like, you know, if I've fully ensconced myself in the fame and the glamour and the glitz of being a film star, I'm not going to be in TV. But now I would argue you could and have been more famous for being in hit television shows than hit films. Movie stars, quote unquote, are kind of gone. Tom Cruise is like the last guy. But you can be a massive television star, like a Bryan Cranston or something like that. And so I think it's just changed people's perspective on the industry, and that has then meant that the people entering it as new performers have a bit more pressure one way or the other to kind of become famous. And it's very odd to me, just because I guess, like, I've missed that boat really, to sort of go, I'm a young person, I'm gonna, like, you know, market, publicize. I was just like, no. We were talking earlier before the podcast started about, like, you know, how certain performers of either a certain age, but especially a certain age, they're very difficult to find on social media because some of them just don't have it. And I think there's a lot of people who are actually like really okay with that. And then I think younger folks, because they feel the pressure to be like, well, I have to like be out there and like hustling and moving and like promoting myself.
Well, and
all this other stuff.
there are some studios now that even I've seen literal actors talk about that. They've said like now like studios are pressuring some of us to have social media presences or to have like big followings. I think Jim Cummings talked about that on his podcast where he like talked to somebody and they said like, oh yeah, they were like telling me that I needed to have some kind of following online to like advertise their stuff or to get a bigger push. And like with 15 years ago, that wouldn't have even been a thing. Like
even 10 years ago, nobody really like it's sort of people used to get big followings because of the stuff they did. And now people get stuff to do because of the following they have. It's topsy-turvy for sure. And there is a little part of me, and it does feel a bit like, you know, old man yells at cloud, where I'm just like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing it backwards like that? Like, and look, there may be some people listening right now who are immediately going to get mad at me, but I'm going to say it, which is, I think that there is too much of a drive and a focus right now on the entire end goal of this career being I get to appear at conventions. And that used to be the retirement plan, that like once you weren't working as much as you'd like and you still wanted to, and look, I used to be a snobby little shit about this. And then I realized, no, you absolutely deserve, because those companies are still making money off your work and you're probably not anymore. So absolutely you should be able to go to a convention and go like, hey, remember that cartoon show that you grew up on and loved so much when you were a kid and now you're like 35, 40 years old and you'd love to meet the people or talk to the people that made that show? Absolutely go to the conventions. But when I see examples of people who it seems quite clear that they're just like, oh man, I can't wait to book blah, 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 so that I can then be a headliner at conventions. I'm just like, that's not supposed to be the goal. Like, we're actors. You're not, like it sounds, it sounds so elitist, I'll say it, but
well, no, I feel
we're
the
supposed
same.
to be, we're supposed to be actors.
Well, yeah, I've seen other voice actors kind of had the same sentiment where they've said like, you shouldn't be going into this wanting money. You shouldn't be going into like
absolutely
obviously
not.
I mean, obviously you're gonna make money if you do this job, but like it's something
not
where
even
you
like that is so not like you might make some.
You're not going to be
and
well. There did you? I assume.
And if
you
you're willing
saw
to debase yourself, you'll make a lot of small amounts of money. As in, if you're willing to debase yourself and undercut to such a like, you know, awful level, then you can absolutely make $50 here, $50 there, 7 days a week. That's not sustainable. And so the big one, like my buddy at one of the last meetings that we had, union meetings we had, he said, because I think people have gotten a perspective where they go like, oh, this should, like, acting should be the only job I have. And I was just like, look, there is such a small percentage of people who can make a full-time living at being an actor. Everybody else does the acting and then has something to sustain their lives, you know, pay their rent and, you know, food bills, while you are trying to do the other thing. And you do that because you love doing the acting thing. And it shouldn't be that you go like, but I should only do the acting work. And my buddy stood up at one of these meetings and he said, I'm going to say something that a lot of people are probably going to be mad with. We all made a very dumb decision to enter the entertainment industry. And if we're all being honest with ourselves, like, it is not on paper a smart decision, but that's not why you do it. You don't enter the arts because it's smart. Like, I think a lot of people get tricked by seeing the 0.0001% of people in the arts that make squillions of dollars.
Oh,
and like any field, like music, like all of it. It's like professional athletes. You'd be like, hey, there's going to be a professional athlete who has a $250 million contract, and then there's some fella in the same league who gets $50,000 a year. That's just how it is. And if you look at that person who makes $250 million and assume everybody else does, that's crazy.
Well, it's like I assume there was this post going around on Blue Sky a couple days ago, and you might have seen, because there were a lot of voice actors talking about it. Was somebody over on Twitter had said something, because I guess there was some, I guess there was the strike.
I know the post. It was the the millionaires.
Oh
can get back
Jennifer
to work.
Hale gets to make millions of dollars. Yeah, the millionaires get to make money. And I'm like, if you think
I've never met a millionaire in the voice acting world.
If you think any voice actors are millionaires, unless they are doing something on the side that makes them a shit ton of money, no voice actors are millionaires. Like,
or unless they've been doing it so long, and like back when it paid more, and then again, not a millionaire from the work, but maybe made some smart investments, maybe, like a various, and like you say, stuff on the side, like where they've got a,
or maybe they're married to somebody who has a shit ton of money.
Maybe, or just like a
that's the
sponsorship
thing.
deal even. But it's like, no. Nobody is making millions. And it's this weird thing where, like, if the product makes millions. So, for example, like, Jen Hale and Mark Meer, the shepherds from Mass Effect, right? So Mass Effect sold hundreds of thousands of copies, made millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars.
You don't make residuals
if they look
for
at that number,
I was gonna say.
well, and even if they did, it'd be like, if you looked at that and you assume that because the game made like $500 million, do you really think, like, how far down the line do you think the performers are in terms of like seeing any part of that? And as you just said, usually it's, I got paid up front, and then I do not see any money ever again.
Well, I remember the guys from GTA, like a few years ago.
GTA 4.
Yeah, or GTA
4
5.
was a big one. But GTA 4, the guy
4.
got roasted for it. I don't remember the fella's name. But he came out and he said, like, I did like 40,000 lines of dialogue for this game, and it came out and made $100 million. And he's like, I got like 50 grand. And people look at that.
Yeah.
And go like, 50 grand, that's so much money. And it's just like, do you have any idea how much work that was?
I remember when after GTA 5 came out, when one of the big video game strikes happened a few years ago, that was one of the big things that people were talking about during the strike, was like, this game is the highest grossing single piece of media in like history. And and nobody got anything for that, really.
No, it's a really unfortunate state of things that, unfortunately, because of other reasons, and especially in the most recent strike, because it was so focused on AI protections. The strike that happened back in, I think it was 2018.
Yeah.
That one, like one of the biggest pushes, and it unfortunately didn't come about, but one of the biggest pushes was to try to get residuals or royalties or bonus payments of any kind based on like units sold for massive projects in the game space, because games, I think, had just been this this also ran dark horse thing in entertainment, and then seemingly out of nowhere for most people, but those who played games and were into games saw it coming. Seemingly out of nowhere, suddenly video games are making more than every other entertainment stream combined.
Yeah.
And the people that go into, being part of making them what they are, not just performers, but like, developers, coders, like everybody, programmers, everybody involved in making those games, they don't really see all of that massive, wads of cash. So it became a really big problem, and it's still a really big problem because, entertainment makes more money than it ever has in the history of the medium, and it's harder and harder to make a living at it.
Well, I remember it was when I remember the actor Joshua Seth, the actor who played Ty in Digimon. I always remembered this story where because he had a very brief character in the SpongeBob movie, had like 3 lines. And I remember he talked about it years ago and said, I made more money off of those 3 lines than all the money I made doing Digimon as the lead.
Yeah,
and how bad anime pays is like another thing. Because again, you don't get residuals for it, like at all. Like it
Yeah,
is.
it's even when it's unionized. So like up here in Canada, it's sort of the inverse of the US, where in Canada most of all anime is unionized, and it's very rare that there's any that isn't. And I know that down in the States, it's more that there are some unionized animes, but it's mostly non-union. Even in a unionized anime, it's line count and session fee, and that's about it. So you could be a character who has like, 10 lines in every single episode, and you really won't walk away with much, especially because, again, no residuals. So like even if it does exceptionally well on a bunch of different platforms, that's it. You get what you get. The only time that it becomes like a lucrative career defining thing in the union space is if if you're lucky enough to like book a lead, as in, again, it's line count, right? So it's like, if I'm the lead, there's a good chance I'm going to be most of the dialogue in this show. So there's a good chance that I'm going to make a decent check. Like I was in Beyblade Burst and a bunch of other animes when I started, World Trigger, some other ones. But I would just have like, handful of lines here, handful of lines there. And I would keep coming back. And, like, hey, it sustained me. It helped pay for groceries and things like that. But I do remember thinking every time, I was just like, yeah, it's only like it's a little bit here and a little bit there. And that's all I'll ever see.
Well, because I last episode, I remember I had actually spoken to when I interviewed Daniel Ross. I remember I talked about how I had been interested in doing voiceover for over a decade, and I'd been doing it since like 2014, since I was like 18 years old. I did a lot of on-off online stuff, and I got some really good gigs out of it. Did some good online stuff. I got a couple games, and I think in the last couple years, I just kind of have gotten to a point where I've gotten so disillusioned with everything, and I've gotten so tired. And
it's really tough. It's tough. And I know that I've just spent like, 25 minutes just going like, bah! But it very much is that thing where, and I've had to do it multiple times in my career. There's two things that I find really helpful. One is positive, and one is sort of like hey, it could be like, it's not good for anyone. Like it's bad all over, which is somehow comforting. So one of the things that I love to do is whenever you find interviews of, like massive celebrities, and they talk about, hey, like, you know me for this, you know me for that, you know that I'm like, a huge star in this sphere. But I want to tell you about a time where like either I nearly quit the business or, I didn't work for like 5 or 6 years. There was an interview just recently that I saw with Alexander Skarsgård, and he was talking about how when he first wanted to get into the industry, he fully admitted and said, like, I'm absolutely a Nepo baby. Like, my dad is Stellan Skarsgård, and I was in New York, and my dad's manager was just like, "Oh, hey kid, like you should I'll get you an audition for Zoolander." And he books it, and he plays one of the the male model friends that has the gasoline fight. And like he books that gig, and he's just like, "Oh, here we go. Like, that my star is on the rise. I'm going to shoot to the top." And he said, like, I didn't work for like, 2 or 3 or 4 years after that. And it's like, it's important to hear those stories, because if you just look at a resume, if you just look at, somebody's meteoric rise, you don't hear about all the many, 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 many years that they had day jobs, had things that, sustained them in other ways. Sometimes, like, again, like he admitted he was a Nepo baby. So it's just like, yeah, my dad was a big star. So, I wasn't going to go without, things were going to be okay. And that's not a luxury everybody gets. And so that's really important to get that perspective, because it's very rare that you see the downturn stories or the like depressing stories, because nobody really wants to hear those. They love hearing about, oh my God, like, I really worked hard, and then I walked into that room and I slayed him, and now I've been a big star ever since. People love to hear that, because it gives you the impression that you could do it if you really believed. And so I like hearing those stories because they're much more sobering and much more honest. But the other thing that I really like doing is taking time, and this is the more positive one, I promise, is taking time every once in a while to really reassess why it is that I do what I do. and sort of, think about like, am I, obviously there's, the day to day of just like, hey, I've got rent to pay, I've got bills, I've got groceries to buy, right? So, I've got responsibilities that absolutely have to be taken care of. But then like, could I do that more easily with some other kind of job? And every time I think about that, I realize not only do I not want to, but I don't think I could. I've tried having day jobs throughout my entire career, and nothing will rob the joy from my life faster than not being able to do what it is that I get to do now professionally. And so like maybe I would push myself into doing like side projects, little fun little things just for myself, which I have done in the past. But that's really the question that you have to sort of keep asking. And like, again, like my buddy said when he stood up in the meeting and said like, hey, we all made a really dumb decision. And it's just like, yeah, it's not a smart decision. It's not a decision that you make going like, this is absolutely a, viable career choice. It's not, but you do it because you have to do it. And that needs to be, in fact, I took a class from Rob Paulson when I was first kind of really professionally starting my career. And I was talking about like moving to North America and pursuing things. And I remember really specifically, he asked me, like he heard some of my stuff and he was like, I think you've got something. But he said, I need to ask you, why are you doing this? And I said, well, because I have to. Like there's nothing else that I can do. Not in a sense of like I don't have the ability to, but it won't work. Like there's something within me that pushes me and drives me to have to do this kind of thing, whether it's voice, whether it's theater, whether it's film, TV, whether it's little skits with my friends. Like I have to do this. And he said, that's the right answer, because you'll be a better performer either way with that. But if you're sort of looking into it to go like, I want to be well known, I want to be on like famous things, I want to make money. It's just like you can rob a bank to get money, to be famous. Like it's really easy to be famous. Now, if you want to be famous for, the right reasons, that's different. But yeah, the focus needs to be on why do you do it? And that's what I try to come back to very often sometimes, especially and it's really important to do when work is quiet, when it's between gigs or it's been a while, it's when the self-doubt starts to creep in. That's when you have to reassess and go like, okay, but why do I do this? Bring it all the way back. And yeah, as long as the answer is still because I have to, then yeah, keep at it.
Because I think what I ended up telling when I was talking to Daniel about it, I had said, I've just kind of gotten to a point where I've gotten so burned out by it and not getting work. And he had even said, I said, like, I have not gotten a decent gig or even like, honestly, even a gig in general in probably like almost 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, and the only things I can get are from friends for the most part.
Sure.
And I had basically just said, I am just kind of at a point where I just don't really think I want to do this that much anymore. And he had even said, like, well, here's the thing. I have been doing this for about 8 years now. And I didn't remotely think I was going to get into this. And I was doing other things. And he said, sometimes things just happen and you think you're going to set your whole life on this one thing. And then you have this moment of reassessment where you realize, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like,
100%. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, again, and that's exactly right. And that's the question that I was saying that like I keep asking when, I check in with myself essentially, and I just go like, hey, are we still doing this because we love it, or are we just doing this because it's what we do? And if the answer ever becomes like, I hate this, or it just like brings me dread, or it's just, it's stressing me out and robbing me of joy rather than giving me joy, well, then it's time to either take a break or quit. But yeah, like there's no sense in like beating that dead horse if it brings you nothing. And I'm not talking about just like, I haven't been given, or I haven't been able to get a good gig or something like that. It's just like, if it doesn't even fulfill you in any way, because that's the thing. Like I sometimes live stream to like a very small audience, like nobody really tunes in, but the thing is that I do it because I find it fun. Like I like playing video games and I like performing and I like chatting to an audience and entertaining an audience. So it's something that even if I quit what I do, I would probably still do that. And I might even make like little skits with my pals. And that's the question that comes up when I say like, do I still want to do this? Like, does it still drive me? If I stopped wanting to do any of that, then I'd be like, okay, then, we did what we did for as long as we did it, and it's time to find something else. But as long as I think there's that hunger in you, then I think it's still worth, chasing and pursuing. Because, again, frankly, like one day it might be different, but I just cannot see myself doing anything else. I remember being asked by my parents when I decided to move to North America. They said, well, what's your backup plan? And I said, genuinely, there is no backup plan.
Yeah, that's been most of my life the last like 15 years is I didn't have a backup
there is plan A. There is plan A, and then if that doesn't work, we'll figure something out. But I'm not making contingencies because it's plan A. Like I don't want to give myself the chance or the reason to either, like not commit to things. But also beyond that, it was like, I just can't think of a plan B. There isn't one. There just isn't one.
I've thought about other things I might want to do, but I'm like, I don't want to commit to them right now is the other thing.
No.
I'm like, because I think what I had said, I kind of went public with this like a few days ago saying, I just think I'm done recurringly looking for voice work because I just don't. And I even had some people some friends who are just like, yeah, if you're just not getting anything out of this, there's no shame in like taking a break or just not wanting to do it anymore. Or
yeah, well, that's a big thing is that like, it's a hustle industry. So if you ever want to take a break, all you need to do is like stop looking and stop auditioning, and the break will happen. Don't worry about it. And then if you want to come back, it can sometimes be harder to start things back up. You're not hitting the ground running. You're sort of having to get up to speed again. But it is an industry that sort of has a revolving door. Like if you want to leave at any time, you can leave at any time. And if you want to come back in, there's always going to be a need for like what you do. Because, and this is, it sounds trite and kind of cliched, but it's like there is only one you. So all of the performance choices that you would make, it's why like, if you want, we could talk about AI, but I will not stop if we do. But like, it's why I'm not really personally afraid of it. I'm furious at it because I think that there's companies who will sell everyone down the river for some magic beans in the form of whatever they think they can get from it. But there will never be anything that can approximate what I do. It might sound like one of the things I've done, but it'll sound like a soulless husk. The same way that like trying to just be another version of someone who already exists, So like you see it with like stand-up comedians, especially where you go like, oh, okay, like you're early on, if you kind of model yourself or pattern yourself on an already successful and existing performer, that kind of makes sense because you go like, all right, that's your influence. That's who has like pushed you to become this. At a certain point, if you never make the choice to be like, okay, but I got to find my own voice, find my own, like thing that drives me, thing I need to say, whatever it is, find my own style. If you never do that, you'll never really get anywhere because they don't need to hear another version of whoever. They're looking for you. And so you got to be you. And that's why I love entertainment and the arts, is because there can only ever be you. And no one can ever replace you. They can imitate you, but yeah, no one will have your life experience, your lived experience to be able to put your take on something. So there's always going to be a need for you. You just have to try to find it or make it. Force your way in.
Oh, because for me, I told him I get more joy now out of just doing this podcast than doing actual voiceover work.
But this is part of it too.
Oh, I know.
Like it's a dialogue, right? Like I know that I have also like yapped for almost all of it, but it's very much it's a collaborative thing, which is also my favorite thing about the entertainment world in general, is that it's all collaborative. Whether it be with your fellow performers or production or the animators or whoever it is, we're all working together to make something. And yeah, so like if it changes forms, something you said before where you were just like, it doesn't matter if you kind of change your mind or whatever. Being able to pivot both as a performer and as a human is incredibly valuable and necessary, because we don't really live in a time where you just kind of lock into something and go, well, now this is what I just do for 40 years and then I retire and travel the French Riviera. That isn't a thing anymore. You don't get to do that. So you need to be able to pivot when things change.
Well, yeah, and I've just gotten to a point where I just enjoy doing this more now. Like I think it's also just because I have so much more control over my own podcast because it's my podcast. Like,
this industry and control. I would urge anyone who has any remote like idea of wanting control, if you want to enter the entertainment industry, give that up immediately.
well, that's why I enjoy. I think one of the main reasons I enjoy doing this podcast. One, I just like talking to people. Like I like talking to people in the industry. I like talking. It's not even just voiceover. I've talked to animators and directors and musicians, and I enjoy talking to people in the field. I think it's just also because I have complete control over this podcast. So I can just, if I want to take a 3-month break, I can take a 3-month break from it. Like,
yeah, 100%. That's how I treat my streaming, which is not good for growth or like visibility on the platform. But that's not why I do it. Like, I'm not trying to be a big star there. I'm just doing it because I find it fun. And so I'll take like 3-month breaks because I'll be like, nah, I'm just not feeling it. And then I'll come back and I'll be like, hey, everybody, we're back.
Yeah, no, it's
like you said, like it's control. So like I audition and I do the work that I am driven by and feel like I have to do. But then when it's something that's just purely me, like say a live stream, I'll just be like, yeah, but I don't want to do that. So I'm only going to do it when I want to do it.
Well,
so
I think the way I had described like what voice acting kind of became to me, because I still enjoy it when I get to do it. I think it's just I remember I had said I've always described it as a snake eating its own tail. It's I enjoy voice acting, but I need to audition to get work. But I'm not getting work, so I'm not auditioning. But if I'm not auditioning, I'm not going to get work. Like it's again, it's a snake eating its own tail. I get depressed because I'm not getting work, but I need to audition to get work, but I'm not auditioning because I'm not getting work.
Well, and a version of that for a lot of folks, and especially it kind of ties back to that thing I was talking about like, marketing, self-promotion, and social media, is that like a lot of people, if they work outside the traditional space of how things get cast, through an agency or, like one of the casting websites, like Casting Workbook or whatever. If you work outside of that, if you mostly work on like independent stuff, or if you work non-union games or, animation and things like that, it'll become like, oh, okay, well, like it's the catch-22 of the, I don't have very much notoriety, so I'm not getting a lot of opportunities to be in things. And then because I don't have the opportunity to be in a lot of things, that doesn't build my notoriety, so that I can't get more opportunities to be in things to build my notoriety. So like, where am I supposed to start? And that can be really, really tough. And I think that that's what pushes a lot of people to be like, oh, okay, so, like I'll make a viral thing, or I'll be on a TikTok going like, get ready with me while I do 1,000 forces. And that's fun. I like doing that sort of stuff. But when it comes from a place of like I said before, like if it comes from like, I wanted to do this because it's goofy and stupid, that's great. But if it comes from oh man, this better go viral, this really it really needs to hit the numbers and, boost my metrics so that I can get those gigs, I'm just like, no, I feel like we're doing it wrong. But maybe it works. I don't know. Like it clearly works a little bit, but there are some people who are very, 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 very like successful on a platform like a TikTok or an Instagram that I never hear about in the professional space. So I don't know.
It's everything is just very, very fickle.
It really is fickle, and like it sounds, I sound repetitive, but I tell my colleagues this mainly because when I tell them, I'm secretly telling myself. But it's the thing about like, hey, look, yes, there's more or less work, now and then, and it goes through cycles and things like that. It always has, but you just sort of need to keep coming back to like, why do you do it? Do you still want to do it? And there's no shame in having a day job, quitting the day job, coming back to the day job. I've done that like 4 or 5 times. And it sucks. Like, it's never fun to be able to go from like, oh my goodness, for like a couple of years. My good friend Caitlin Bairstow, she was talking about this the other day, and she said, I like in the last 5 years, I had 3 of my best, and they weren't all together. Like, they weren't 3 in a row. And that's most people's career, I know. It's like, it's going to be up and down and crazy and all over the place. And sometimes you will lean a little harder on a side hustle or a day job than you do on the professional acting work. And look, we ran away to join the circus. And the circus doesn't always make a ton of money. Sometimes you get paid the peanuts that they would have given to the elephants.
I remember, I think it was Steve Bloom. I think he had said something like, it's an industry where you can just stop working just because you're not getting work anymore. Like,
yeah, the momentum is a huge factor. I have seen people who have like pushed so hard because they feel, and they're not wrong, but they feel like, hey, I'm having a little bit of a micro moment, and if I don't capitalize on this micro moment, it'll disappear through my hands like sand, and then I'll never get that again. And it's like, yes, sort of, because there is still just fundamentally the thing of just like, I think if you do good work, you will get more opportunities. I think that the sort of notoriety thing, and again, it's maybe what I want to believe rather than maybe what is completely true, but I think the extra notoriety isn't necessarily going to help if you're not ready for it. If you don't have the experience and the good works, like solid, consistent good work that you do, if you don't have that in your back pocket when you get the opportunity, I don't think it'll help you. I think it will mean that you get an opportunity and then it's a sort of a fart in the bath. It's a little bit just like, okay, I guess. And then you might not get another chance. And you might have like screwed up all the momentum you had. So it's like, yeah, I've been okay through most of my career. In fact, I would say pretty much all of it. Just doing, like bit part here, bit part there, guest spot here, recurring there, lead on one thing, like literally one thing. Because I think I probably wasn't ready yet. And I'm okay with like slowly building that thing. Richard Dreyfuss, when he won an Oscar for Jaws, I believe, said that there was a little voice that whispered in the back of his head. Oh, no, maybe it was Close Encounters. Anyway, like pretty much same year or within a couple of years of each other. He stood up on the stage while he was being applauded, and he said a little voice spoke in the back of his head that said, too soon, too soon.
Oh, I've heard that story before, yeah.
Yeah, he was just like, he wasn't wrong, but he was just like, yeah, like there was a huge gap then after that, because it was like, well, yeah, he's got an Oscar. Like, it's like, if you weren't ready for it, if you didn't get it at the right time, it could actually like really hurt you.
Oh,
so,
I've seen I remember my dad had said like one time, like when people win an Oscar, sometimes they just disappear for like 7 years.
Absolutely.
Like
well, Anna Paquin, who won it as a child for The Piano, we didn't really see her again until X-Men.
Yeah. It
can be a curse.
They'll just do TV work for like years or something like that. Or maybe they'll do like one movie, or the worst fate is you get stuck in straight to DVD Redbox hell, where you're just doing shitty movies over in like the Philippines or something that like nobody watches. Like Steven Seagal, like that kind of person.
Yeah. The as you said it perfectly just earlier. The business is so fickle. It really is. So the one thing, it again, like it sounds sort of woo-woo philosophical, which is actually one of the things I hate the most in people in the entertainment industry. But one of the things that is sort of true is that it's just like, okay, so the business is fickle, the universe is fickle. Arts in general, it can be fickle, especially once it's commercialized, right? Once it becomes a business rather than just an artistic endeavor, yes, it gets incredibly fickle. But what you can have control over is that you are not fickle. you can be consistent. You can be like the very best version of a performer that you can try to be. And that's really all you can control. And so as much as everything is out of your hands, once you send that audition off, once you know, like walk out of the audition room, as soon as that's happened, it's completely out of your hands. And there's very little to nothing that you can do after that. So what you need to remember, and I've done this where I've like walked out and gone, oh, that wasn't my best. And then I've had to kind of, you know, like repudiate myself and just be like, well, then be better next time. Like if you walked out and immediately thought that that wasn't your best, what are you going to do to make sure that the next time you walk out, you say, and I've done this before and it feels so good when you either walk out or send the email off and you go, you know what? I absolutely nailed that. And if they don't pick me, they're wrong. You need to get to that place more. And that's what you can have control over, because every other facet of this entire industry is so vastly, like overwhelmingly out of your control that it's really important to remember what you can control. And what you can control is how hard you work at being the best performer that you can be.
Right. It's something where I'm like, you don't even really know what to say anymore. Just like with how the industry just,
yeah.
I forget who said this, but I remember somebody had said like the industry just really beats you down after a while.
It can. I tell people at conventions, when I'm lucky enough to be invited, but they'll ask and they'll say like, what are some pieces of advice, some things that like you wish you knew and things like that. And one of the biggest ones, apart from don't quit, genuinely, that should be like the #1 piece of advice I would ever give. Cause I'm just like, well, look, if you quit, you absolutely guarantee that you won't work. So if you want to have a chance at all, even the smallest chance in the world, don't quit. But the second piece would be keep something for yourself, whether that is energy, whether that is like some kind of creative outlet, like whether it's, attention, like whatever it is, keep something for yourself, because this industry will take every single thing that you give it and more, and it will chew you up and spit you out because it does not care about you. It's not a person, it's a machine. And if you don't keep something for yourself, whether that be like, like a good friendship, you're just like a little hobby that distracts you, whatever it is, like make sure that there's something for you. Because if you dedicate every waking moment, every piece of energy, every thought, every endeavor, it'll take it all and you'll be left with nothing. It's a hungry, hungry beast, and you need to keep something for yourself. So on top of being fickle, it'll destroy you if you let it. It really will. And there's so much evidence of that, like where you see people who have like been usually much more, like famous in the industry of, whether it be music, film, TV, whatever, they will be destroyed. And it's because often whoever was around them failed them and didn't, ever give them a lesson about like, hey, maybe don't go absolutely balls to the wall.
You see that with child actors all the time.
100%. That's exactly who I'm thinking of when I'm just like, the people that should have protected them and been like, hey, maybe we don't make your entire life about this. Maybe we keep something for you. Maybe you have hobbies. So some of the child actors that have then gone on and I think Anne Hathaway did this. I might be wrong. But so she like came up during the Princess Diaries, right? When she was still a child. And that's like stardom. And I think she then went and like finished her schooling. Like I think went to university. I think who else did this?
I remember there was like that whole thing of like a lot of Disney Channel stars. There was like a whole cycle for like years, like Lindsay Lohan, Demi Lovato, Shia LaBeouf, like
Amanda
all
Bynes.
of them, Amanda Bynes, well, that's not Disney, but even then, like the Nickelodeon Disney Channel
That was Nickelodeon,
era,
yeah.
Nickelodeon Disney Channel era, where a lot of those people just had really, really fucked up lives after a while, like once they became adults. And
in a lot of the cases, especially for child actors, it's because the child suddenly becomes the gravy train. So the support system that should be there to be like, hey, I'm your mom or I'm your dad and I'm trying to protect you and you shouldn't be doing as much as you're doing. They're just like, oh, but if they do a little more, then that's a little more
like
for all of
Macaulay
us.
Culkin literally sued his parents because his parents were stealing his money from like when he was an actor. Like, because it's like either the industry fucks up the child or the lack of, I guess the lack of either like a parental figure or the lack of just somebody telling them to stop or slow down.
Well, and see, yes, that is true. It is both. But I would say the reason for me that it's the industry above like a family unit is because the industry has essentially tacitly said, I don't care. It's up to whoever else to stop me. Like, it's basically somebody saying like, hey, look, I am what I am. I'm a horrible, horrible monster that's going to chew you up and spit you out, destroy.
And I don't care.
And it's up to somebody else to keep you away from me.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to keep doing that. And if nobody stops me, that's what's going to happen. And that's kind of what the industry becomes, is that it's like, yes, those parents failed that child, but the industry is sort of built on definitely doing that. So much so that I've got friends who've worked in like, talent management and production who have genuinely said, I don't think children should be actors.
Oh, I've heard that for years of I've seen so many people say
in no way, they'd just be like, they'd be like, you know what? We just shouldn't have child actors.
Yeah.
Tell stories without children somehow, whatever.
The actors in Bluey, I know all the child actors, they are not credited because they're not paid. It's like, I think they made.
I think they aren't they the children of the people that created it?
Yeah, and it's also
so they'll get paid eventually.
Yeah, they get paid for that. But it's I remember it's like certain laws in Australia, and child actors don't get credited because of that. And it's not a case of like, oh, this is this. Like, it's also just a case of protection. So people don't.
Sure, 100%.
So these children don't have fucked up lives surrounded by $1 million deals and things like that. Yeah. Which I personally think the states should be doing, and multiple other countries should be doing that to keep anonymity to children so they don't ruin their lives, basically.
Yeah, I think I think that there are too many people who have abdicated their own responsibility in what happens. To where they're just like, well, that's a you problem. Like, I'm just doing a thing over here. And like, if, I'm just swinging my arms, and if you happen to be nearby and I catch you with a fist to the face, that's your fault. And it's like, you don't need to be swinging your arms. You could calm down. And so, and I say this, fully knowing that I'm in the industry and I'm not naive enough to think I can change it from within, but I just see, and so I tell people as much as I can. I'm just like, look, it will be tempting. Now, maybe it's because I've never reached sort of, the heights of fame and power and fortune where it's an option, but I just don't see myself wanting to give that much to the industry. Now, look, money and power and fame is very, very seductive to a lot of people, but I tell people, look, whatever happens, don't let the industry take more than you're willing to give.
Well, it's like,
and also maybe have some real people around you. I went and visited a friend in LA once, and he was really effusively happy to see me. Like, it had been a few years since we'd seen each other. And he was there making a miniseries, and we hadn't seen each other a while, and he was like so happy to see me. And he kept saying it. He was like, it's so good to see you, man. And I realized after like a day, because I was there for a few days, but I realized after a day, and he'd said it multiple times, I was just like, oh, I'm like the first real
human being. Like,
from the old days back in Australia, who he's seen in, months and months. He's been surrounded by industry people, LA people, people who, when they ask you, they go like, oh, hey, what do you do? They're not actually curious. They're sort of going, what do you like? Should I be friends with you? Or what's the story? What's going on? What do you do? What could you do for me?
Yeah, I think about because you're talking about the child actors from that early 2000s, late 90s era. Hillary Duff is like one of the only ones I can think back on where she didn't really have any big stuff happen. She basically like semi-retired from acting. She wrote a book, she got married and had a child. Like, it's
good for her,
which is crazy because she was like the lead on a Disney Channel show and a big Disney Channel show. Or
and she was in movies.
Dylan and Cole Sprouse, they retired from acting for like a decade after Sweet Life on Deck. They like basically completely retired from acting for like 7-8 years. They finished college, and one of them doesn't really do acting anymore, and the other one went back to acting, and he's doing pretty well. Like.
Yeah, and that's like there are exactly for every example of like, you know, horrible stuff that's happened, there are examples of people that, but I think that the examples that you gave, it's just like, yeah, it's when people kind of reassess like why they're doing it. And the big one for me is when I hear about, you know, maybe somebody who either, you know, like a musician who had a massive hit that made like, you know, millions and millions of dollars, or an actor who hit it huge and then kind of, you know, disappeared into a private life. I'm just like, yeah, absolutely. If you realize that, you know, outside of maybe little projects here and there, that it wasn't what drove you, and you then have all the money to do exactly what it is you want to do for the rest of your life, well done. Like, you won. You did it. Yeah. You get to now live life the way that everybody wishes that they could, which is that you just kind of vibe around.
I'm like, I don't, like, me personally, I don't like Dave Chappelle. I don't like him as a person. But when I hear him talk about how he left the industry for like a decade because he was just so fucking tired of it, I totally get it. He was just like, I just wanted to be with my family, and I got tired of doing television, and I felt like I was going insane, constantly working, and I just wanted to step away from everything for like 10 years. Like, it seems understandable, but it like, and so when you hear about people that do that, you just like, and then when people get caught up, you also go, okay, but I could also see how you could get stuck in the treadmill of it. Well, yeah,
like it always comes back to like, why do you do it, and what is it about? Why do you do it for you? Right? So that, I think, has to be the question, especially when it's, and I think it makes you a better performer, because it leads you to more introspection, which is what you should be doing, you know, as part of the performing and that sort of stuff anyway. Is that really it just does become this reassessment of, you know, why am I doing it? And I think the big one is to just kind of be careful, because you might get everything you wish for, and that might not actually be great.
And I don't even, how long was this conversation? I'm looking back at our time right now. Oh my God.
Lengthy.
Like
my God.
That was like a 40-minute just on that one topic.
Geez.
Oh,
that's a big one. That's a big one that I like I said, I say it at conventions all the time, because, and maybe again, it's because like I have not been at a point in my career or in the industry where I've had it happen to me, where I was just like a massive superstar and then like bad things happen. But I was just like, I've seen it take friends. I've seen it, you know, ruin people that I knew professionally. And I'm just like, yeah, if you really put too much stock, the big one is obviously for performers, it's just like, if you associate your self-worth, and it's hard not to, but if you associate your self-worth too closely with how successful you are, that's already a recipe that goes downhill. Because again, like we talked about, everything is out of your control. So obviously and massively and completely. So to then put your self-worth in something you can't control, I hope it all goes really, really well, because if it doesn't, and it's tied to your self-worth, then we're in trouble.
Well, yeah, and I guess I don't really know how to segue into the next question, because we've been on this for so long.
Let's straight into it.
We've been on this for so long. I'm like, I have no proper way. I've had that a few times where I've just been talking about one topic with someone for so long. I'm like, I have no organic way to segue into the next question.
Now what you do is you grab the steering wheel, and you just pull it hard over to the right.
I'm like, I remember I I'm not going to say who, but there was someone I interviewed, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't a person who I was like, oh, this person was a piece of shit. No, it wasn't a person who was a piece of shit. It was just more so I had interviewed somebody, and I thought I knew their career better than I did. And I started looking at their like behind the voice actors page, their IMDb, and I was like, oh, let me start writing down stuff like a couple days before the interview so I get prepared. And I was looking at their resume, and I was like, I only know like 2 fucking things here.
So all right. Well, like, we contain multitudes.
I had to bullshit so much of that interview because I was like, I know like nothing about your career except these like 2 things.
Well, that's all right here. That's all right here because I've got enough bullshit for the both of us.
Oh no, and this person did talk a lot, but it was just more so I was like, I've got like nothing to go on for like most of your career because I'm like, I have not played any of these games. I haven't watched any of these shows. I don't know any. I know these are popular things, but I know like nothing about them. I was like, why couldn't you have been in like Star Wars or Marvel or things like that? At least I'd be able to talk about that, like even if it was like a minor thing. But it was I that's like kind of one of those interviews I wasn't really happy with just because I basically just interviewed somebody that I just didn't have enough knowledge about their career to really get a good interview out of it.
But we grow and we learn.
Oh yeah, no, since then since then I've been like, no, I have to get people I either know the person, like I know the person decently, or I have like a decent knowledge of their career. I can't get people just because I know they're a big person, because this was a fairly big voice actor. And
I get you.
It was a fairly big voice actor, and I just kind of got him because I was like, oh, they might be kind of cool. And then it was only when it was too late I realized, oh god, I know like nothing about their career.
Oh no.
Yeah. But I guess with I guess that can kind of segue is because I remember the first time I had seen you, and I think a lot of people had seen you, was on My Little Pony. You were on probably like one of the most famous episodes of the show, where you played
so
Applejack's
strange
dad.
to me that that was so strange to me because that was also my first like big job.
Well, yeah, because I remember when I saw your name in the credits, I was like, I don't know who this is, and I looked at like your filmography, and I was like, oh my god,
knew
this
who
is
that guy was.
Well, yeah, no, I was like, oh, this is like a really new person who did this character, like.
And I was lucky enough that like, you know, I'd had performing experience, right? Like I'd done theater, I'd worked in theater groups and things like that. So it's that thing of another thing that I tell people at conventions all the time when they go like, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to be a voice actor? And like, apart from the other 2 things I said, actually the first step. So like, you know, obviously don't give the industry everything. That's something that comes later in the career. But the biggest one is like performing experience. If you live in a small town, if there's a community theater group, join it. If there's not, start one. Start performing. Be a performer. Like, get performing under your belt, because I was nervous as hell. Not because I knew anything about the characters. They'd sort of told me like, oh, these are, you know, this character is, you know, they've been talked about, and like, you know, they're the parents, the long lost, wink wink, parents of the main, you know, like sort of some of the main characters. And I was like, okay. So I was told that it was a sort of a big deal, but I just still treated it like, you know, like any other job, which is what you're supposed to do. But I was nervous as hell, but I wasn't scared because like I knew that I had a take, I had a way that I wanted to do it, and luckily they liked that. But yeah, it's one of those things that I do remember because people said like, you came out of nowhere, and I was like, kind of like sort of, yes, like, you know, as far as showing up on people's radars, yes. But that's true of almost everybody in the performing arts, which is that, like, you know, until you heard about them, there's a good chance that there's like, you know, years and years and years and years and years and years and years of like getting to that moment. And circling back to one of the things I said earlier, like I was lucky enough that I was prepared enough that when the opportunity came, I was just like, yep, let's go. Instead of being like, oh shit, because that can hurt you that can hurt you more than it helps you. I've been on projects where somebody who was very new got like quite a big role, and then it sort of becomes obvious through the production that they're a little out of their depth, and it's sort of frustrating for everyone involved. But the thing I worry about is that through not necessarily any fault of theirs, like their only fault is not being experienced, and that's not their fault. The fault is of the production that cast them, because it's just like, well, you didn't know enough and didn't try hard enough often to figure out if this person was right for it. You just sort of went like, yep, seems good. And now that mistake by production is going to hurt that performer, because either people are going to hear it and go, oh, that's not very good. Or production, if they're asked by another production, like, oh, hey, how was that performer? They'll be like, tough to work with. And it's just like, what the hell, man?
Well, I remember there was like a story I had heard. I think it was like Charlie Adler had said, because Michael Dorn was like I Am Weasel, and he was on Star Trek, like
Yes,
notable TV actor. And
Yeah.
I remember Charlie Adler had said he was like super new to voiceover. He'd only done it like 2 or 3 times. And he had said when he came in to do I Am Weasel, he was fucking awful. Like he could not.
That sounds exactly like how Charlie would say it too.
Which is so funny to me because of how good of a voice actor Michael Dorn is. It's just so funny to me to think that how just he was genuinely terrible at like one of his most famous characters when he started out.
I've watched people who've come from film and TV and then like joined a production, a voice production, and it's the one of the happiest moments is when you really see them grow. And like, you know, they start out and it's just like, okay, we're going to get there, we're going to work our way through. It's a different medium, and like, you know, people would give them tips. That's another thing about like the voice world that I don't know if it happens as much in film and TV. I haven't heard that it has or experienced it, but in the voice world, a lot of the people in the community are very, very willing to like, you know, reach out a hand and help. And so we'd help with these, help newer people, and then watching them, like, you know, the difference between say like, you know, their first couple of episodes and then like, you know, their episodes at the end of the season, the massive difference in just terms of like, you know, confidence, but also performing ability for the voice medium. It makes me so happy to see. I'm just like, yes, we got there. We did it. We built you a new muscle that you can use now.
Well, I guess the thing I was curious with you doing My Little Pony was you were multiple characters on that. I mean, all like like guest characters basically. And I guess was like, because I remember at the time it was like, oh my god, he's played like so many characters on this show in such a short period. And a lot
I wish
of
I'd
them,
moved earlier. I might have been in more seasons.
Yeah, I was wondering, were all of those auditions, or were like some of them like, hey, we want you to play this other character at some point?
No, all of them were auditions.
Okay. Because I'd always, whenever I see people, because it's very rare when I see an actor on a production like that where they play multiple notable one-offs. It's usually like, oh, they played this character and then they played like these 3 other like 2-line incidental things. Like it was just interesting because it's like you're the ending villain of a season. You're the villain at the end of the season. You're in the Applejack like parents episode. You play, I forget what they're called. The bug. I forgot what they're called. The bugs.
The changelings.
Pharynx. I forgot what they were called. Yeah, and like one other like one-off character.
Snap Shutter.
Yeah.
That one, I believe I still auditioned for it, but I realized later. So I got asked, I was at a My Little Pony convention, I forget which one, but there were some writers at that one, because that was something I actually really liked about the My Little Pony conventions, which is still going, but like I just haven't been to one for a very long time. I really liked it because they would have like actors from the show, writers from the show, and, you know, like casting and directors from the show. So you get these like fantastic panels, which would have really interesting insight from multiple different people at different points in the production. But I was talking in the green room once, just as I do in my regular speaking voice. And I think in hindsight, I think they might have been working on the sort of the nugget of the idea of the character of Snap Shutter.
So you think that they might have wanted you to play that character?
I think they might have wanted me for it. I still auditioned for it, but it might have been that they were just like, oh, I hope Bill reads for this, and then I read for it, and they were just like, yes. Also, like I said, I have an authentic Australian accent. I am Australian, so it's again, I very rarely, if ever, heard what I would consider to be a convincing Australian accent from anyone who's not. So maybe Kiwis could do it. Maybe people from New Zealand could do it. But I think they maybe heard it, and it was a combination of knowing that it was me, and that I could perform, like regardless of the accent, but also I think hearing that it was a genuinely Australian accent, they were just like, yep, perfect.
Well,
but yeah, so it was Snap, Shutter, Pharynx, Stygian, Pony of Shadows, and Bright Mac.
Yeah. And because Stygian and Pony of Shadows are like the same character. Did you audition for both, or was it like, oh, well, you're playing one, so obviously you're going to have to play the other?
I don't completely remember, but I think the audition was for the big booming Pony of Shadows. And then I think I remember reading the script and it saying that, like, when the Pony of Shadows recedes and it's just Stygian, it's like, it's a much more meek and small voice. And I think I can't remember if I came up with that on the day or if I auditioned with it. Just a little voice like this. Because I was just like, it really was just a matter of just like, okay, so we go from big booming voice to oh dear,
Venom Pony, I think is what a lot of people call them.
Kind of, yeah. And then if the Tom Hardy Venom had been out, then it probably would have sounded more like Roy the Pony of Shadows.
What's so weird? Because his voice for that character changed between movies. Because like you watch that first Venom movie and then you watch that second Venom movie, it's like two different performances.
It is a little bit.
Yeah, because that second one, it's a lot more boisterous. It's a lot more loud and over the top.
Well, and I think they're leaning into that a bit more. Like I think everybody loved how sort of silly it was, like, monstrous, certainly, but kind of goofy.
Because
and people really liked it, and I think that probably the note that they got was just like, hey, more of that, please.
I think for me, I honestly prefer the first movie voice because I think it made some of the funnier lines funnier. That it just was this scary voice saying stupid things. I think just sounded funnier.
I haven't seen the third one yet.
I haven't really cared to see the third one. I liked the second one. I've heard the third one wasn't that great from a lot of people. But I guess what was your I assume, were you aware of bronies? That's kind of my other thing, because I always love asking. I love asking pony people that question if they were aware of it at the time.
Vaguely, I probably not really, just because it was like when I grew up, the version of ponies that was on like Saturday morning cartoons was, I think, maybe Gen 2.
Yeah,
maybe even Gen 1. It might have even been reruns of Gen 1. But they were very, very different, and it was very, very much marketed like so specifically for girls.
Yeah, Ponytails was 1992. So that was the second show that they made.
Okay, then it was Gen 1. So it was Gen 1 that I grew up with. And so that was a very, very, very different show. So I wasn't really familiar with the show even very much at all. I knew of the jingle in my head from the commercials where they would sell it, and like you could put the hot water on them and they would change colors, like My Little Pony, My Little. So that was like the old toy jingle. That's about all I knew. And then when I talked about, I was talking to Big Jim, who was one of the directors of the show and one of the writers.
Big Jim Miller?
Or storyboard artists. Big Jim Miller. Yep. And it later became one of the directors of the show. But I was talking to him on one of those episodes. It might have been either a Pony of Shadows or it might have been a Bright Mac. And they were just like, I think they asked me the same question. I think they were just like, do you know what bronies are? And I was like, sort of. And they were like, are you ready? Like for what's going to happen? And I was just like, what do you mean?
I had always kind of assumed.
They were like, you're going to be followed by a lot of people on social media. You're going to get invited to conventions. And I was like, okay.
Well, it's like, because anytime I've interviewed pony people, I had always kind of assumed once they got to like season 4, it was just like, okay, I assume they tell everybody that comes on the show, hey, you're gonna get a pretty decently substantial following online probably after
they
do
did
this.
sort of preface some of their stuff with that. They were just like, hey, yeah, just so you know, like now that you've been on the show, you're gonna get the attention of a lot of fans online. So there's like, there's very intense and dedicated fandom. So just so you know. I don't think they said like, anything was going to be weird or anything was going to be like, confronting or anything like that. I don't think there was any negativity associated. I think that they were just like, just so you know. And I was like, okay, sure. Yeah. And then I think within a couple of days of my first episode airing, I got reached out to go to a convention.
Well,
so
I think
cool.
Well, I mean, I think it's just because also, again, having your first episode be probably one of the most famous episodes of the show.
That was something I had no idea of at the
time.
I
know. Like, I believe
the thing
that,
I was most excited about was that another voice in the episode was going to be William Shatner.
It was William Shatner.
Sorry?
Oh, I said it was Shatner. Well,
yeah, like
Shatner.
that was what me. I was just like, wow.
I assume I assume he wasn't at the session. If you
no. So that happens a lot if there's a co-production and there's people elsewhere. So like for Monster Beach, for example, Rove McManus, he's an Australian comedian and performer. So we unfortunately never got to do any sessions because of the time difference. So he recorded all his stuff, and then later we would usually, I think he would do it first. Actually, I don't remember which way we did it, but yes, that happens all the time. If there's, especially if there's a big star, and if they're, honestly, from what I understand, even in LA, where most, celebrities are based, if they're all on the same show, it's exceptionally rare, if not, unheard of, that they will be in the room. They will usually record their stuff separately and then it'll get stitched together, which is a bummer. Like, I really love ensemble records, which happens a little bit in the US, but very, very rarely, and is actually very, very normal to happen in Vancouver. And there's just something about the energy. I wish he was there. We had somebody who just, like, one of the people who was in the episode who would just read the lines. But yeah, no, I wished he'd been there.
I assume because you're paired with Felicia Day, who is also LA based. So I'm assuming it was the same thing where she probably wasn't.
Same thing.
Yeah.
So somebody in the room, I don't remember who, but somebody in the room like read those lines so that I had, some performance to base my performance off of. And then I think they would probably have played my lines to Felicia Day when she recorded hers.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't know if you had recorded first or she recorded first. I mean,
I think it was me. I don't remember hearing her stuff. I think they usually would record the bigger group first, so that meant everybody who was in the room in Vancouver at the time.
Okay, because I guess another thing I was curious about, because you've actually done some, you've done a few Marvel things, which I thought was interesting, because it had been I think it had been quite a while since there had been a Marvel Canadian production. I think at the time you had been doing those little shorts they were doing. And I guess what was it like getting to do? Because you were Loki.
I was also Justin Hammer.
And Mr. Fantastic for another series.
Yeah, I did Mr. Fantastic for one or two of the little, I think, Spider-Man shorts.
Yeah, and I guess what was it like getting to do those kind of characters?
Really fun. So the Mr. Fantastic was fun, but sort of short-lived. It was only a couple of lines, and they were very short episodes because I think they were designed from the ground up to be like 5-minute YouTube shorts for kids. So it was very, very short episodes, not a lot of lines to do. So But the Lego stuff, the Lego Marvel stuff, and then the other like non-Lego Marvel stuff, but especially the Lego stuff, that was the most fun. That was stuff that like really, it had also been like a little while, and it was, you know, sadly, it was the last show that I did, literally up to like a few weeks before. It was the last show that I did before COVID. We came back to do some pickups on that show, literally, I think a week before everything shut down.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So, but that was one where we were all in the room. So that was like a cast of, I want to say 8 people at a time, just doing everything. And that was really fun. I loved playing Loki. I love playing villains, especially like, you know, sexy, mysterious, mischievous villains. So that was fantastic. I loved doing that so much. Brother,
well,
so good of you to come.
Do they tell you to try and emulate like Hiddleston, or they like try to make you do kind of your own thing, or like
kind of my own thing? So I remember them saying, they were just like, look, feel free to watch some stuff, like watch the Avengers films, but we're not, they will often say this, they will say like, we're not looking for an impression. So we don't need you to do a Tom Hiddleston impression, because honestly, that will probably restrict you in terms of, you know, what we might need you to do, because the Lego shows are much crazier, obviously, than the films can be, because, you know, it's Lego, so you'll often have things where, you know, someone will get hit and they'll just go blip, 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 into a bunch of bricks. So they don't want you too grounded in like a Tom Hiddleston impression, because that's a little more realistic and a little more closer to live action, right? So they were like, this happens a lot where they'll say like, this is the like vibe reference. That's not how they say it, but that's always how I get it in my head, where they go, Tom Hiddleston's Loki from Avengers, etc., is the vibe. It's not the voice print necessarily, and it's not the impression that we want. So feel free to like, you know, kind of do your own thing with it, but that's the sort of the vibe we're looking for.
Because I know,
and I was like, great, perfect.
I know in the States, I think they've gotten a bit more laxed with it, but I know like several, from what I know, some of like the more like American cartoons they've done for Marvel, they try to get some of the actors to do impressions of like the MCU actors.
There was a funny one that came up and it was before the Loki stuff. I think it was even before the Justin Hammer stuff. It was for a Marvel animated comic series. So it was
like one of those like motion comics?
Yes, motion comics. So it was a motion comic thing, and it was going to be based around like Thor Ragnarok, and it was going to have Korg, you know, the giant rock monster, who's played by Taika Waititi.
Yep.
And he's going to like, oh yeah, you know, and the hammer. Oh, the hammer pulled you off. Oh no. So I did an audition for that. And I was just like, surely I'm going to get this. Although Alessandro Giuliani, who's a great performer in Vancouver, he does a really good Korg as well. And I heard him when we went to do the audition at the studio. And I was like, damn, okay, I thought I had this in the bag, but he might have this too. So I was like, it's got to be down to me and him. And I didn't hear anything. And then I talked to the producer of that project months later, I think, and I was just like, hey, I'm just curious, because like obviously I didn't get it, but who did get the Korg part for that motion comic? And she goes, oh, we got Taika Waititi.
Oh.
and I was like, oh, you know what, fair. You know, if I was going to lose out on that part, the person who originated the part, that makes sense, that's fair, you know. All right, okay. Which does sometimes happen. You know, like sometimes you'll do scratch on a project, and they will say like in the description of what they want you to do scratch for. I don't know if your listeners know what scratch is, but it's essentially where it's like a guide track. Well, scratch will be like a guide track for like the animators to sort of get an animatic together.
Yeah, I've had to record with that before, where somebody recorded like their own audio, and they were like, oh yeah, just like.
Exactly.
Go over this.
It's to give like timing and vibe, because the director will direct you for the scratch. It's timing and vibe, not just for the performer that they're looking to get, but also for the animators to get started. Famously, Mark Meer for Commander Shepard in Mass Effect, went in because he was a theater performer in Edmonton, and I believe the voice producer and those folks knew him, so they were just like, oh, he'd be really good to do scratch track for. Did scratch track, and then like did such a good job, they were just like, why don't we just keep Mark? And they did. But sometimes you'll do scratch track, and they'll give you a description of what they want the kind of the vibe or the voice print reference to be for the scratch track. And that'll usually tell you who they actually want to get. If it's like a big celebrity, it's depending on the size of the project. But yeah, you'll be like, oh, okay, so for this big Marvel thing, like, you know, they want to get Taika Waititi doing Korg. There's always like a little thing in your head where you're just like, I think you're going to try to get Taika Waititi. And if you can't get him, then it might be me. But if you can get him, then it's just going to be him. So I've done scratch on projects before for, you know, like Australian actors where they'll say like, you know, hey, looking for a vibe like this. And I'll be like, that's who you want, isn't it? Like that's who you are aiming for. And if you can get it, then that's probably what you'll do. And if not, maybe me, but probably not. Again, depending on the size of the project, because it's sad that, you know, even I'd say mid to upper tier projects, there's just not really ever going to be the chance that they go, you know what, look, this guy's got like 30 credits. And we don't know, but let's give him a shot. They'll be like, no, celebrity. Like, stop asking. So, yeah, I've done a few like that, and it'll usually be where, yeah, like the vibe of something rather than specifically a character reference. But it is always funny when you go like, okay, past a certain point, they are just going to sort of cast sound-alikes because depending on the cast, it's always Star Wars stuff is a big one. Where you go,
yeah. Well, because Star Wars is like that one franchise where they want super consistency.
They do, they'll be like, well, you have to sound like what it sounds like, and then, but at the same time, they're just like, yeah, but we also absolutely cannot afford that megastar-studded cast. Like we can't afford Harrison Ford. Also, Harrison Ford doesn't sound like he did back then anymore. Neither does Mark Hamill and like half of everybody. So it's like, okay, yeah, sure. But even if you could, do you have the budget for their rates?
Well, it's basically, yeah, because I have seen a lot of people who are just like, well, how good can you do this impression?
Yeah.
Like how good, like, or how even, sometimes it's not even how great, it's sometimes how decent can you do the impression.
Absolutely. Well, because when they're looking for sound-alikes, they're looking for so many things. Because again, if it's a dead-on impression, that's one thing. If you can't get the essence of the performance, then the impression doesn't matter.
Well, because I've always said the big thing, like doing a Harrison Ford impression is really hard because it's really hard to do it without sounding bored. Because he just has a naturally, like, I could try to do it. I could try to do like, hey, Chewie, we're going to get the Millennium Falcon. Like, that voice could sound really boring if you don't get it
It's tough.
right.
He's quite stoic, and he's quite under, like, what is it? Under, struggling for words. Words are my business. Understated. It's understated, and he's quite a stoic character, so he doesn't say a lot of words, and when he does, like, they have a very particular way of like being said. Yeah, you're exactly right. It can fall dangerously into like sounding like you're tired or bored for him, and so it takes a lot more work. And so you can do like a dead-on impression, but if you can't sort of get that essence. And I've played plenty of games. Like there was a really good example of a game I played, which was the PlayStation Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh yeah, I really like that game.
I really like that game, and it's clear that what they said was, "Hey, we're looking for the similar vibes of these characters." Now, you can draw some inspiration if you wish for, you know, Star-Lord, Gamora, all these characters from the movies if you want, but feel free to, like, you know, have your own take on it. And they did, and I loved it.
I think
at no point did I go, oh, this doesn't sound like Dave Bautista. Boo.
It's interesting because I think the whole cast is like this really solid middle ground between the movies and their own unique takes. The only one where I'm like, I don't really get Chris Pratt out of it is Star-Lord. That's like the only one where I think that's the most unique sounding performance of the cast.
Yeah, and I actually liked it better because it felt a little more like the character. It felt a little more like the character than the actor who was doing the performance.
Surfer dude-ish is how I like always describe.
Which is kind of his thing, like all that music he listens to, the stuff that he. So like in the comics and in other depictions of Star-Lord, that's much more his vibe. And so that really, I mean, he calls himself Star-Lord for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
But knowing that that's like ridiculous. So that's absolutely that. I think I might have liked it more than the movies. The other thing that I really enjoyed was that the energy of everybody in the video game performances, it meshed much better together. Like it felt more cohesive and it made more sense. A lot of the times in films, especially when it's people who are a little more like established and famous, everybody's sort of just doing their own thing.
Oh, right. Yeah. Because I remember when I played that game, it was just it was interesting because I remember, I think it was like Rocket specifically. I was like, this is so close to Bradley Cooper, but it's its own thing. Yeah. At the same time. Yeah.
Now, I was just thinking of that. I was just like, look, that one was quite close, but that's because I think that's like, I wouldn't say perfect, but like that's very, very much the vibe of that character.
Well, that's also just how the characters become now because of Bradley Cooper. Yes. He is like that performance has now influenced every performance of Rocket Raccoon since that movie because originally he was British. And now nobody does that anymore for Rocket Raccoon. Like, nobody does that anymore. The last time you heard that was, like, Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Wow.
Like, nobody does that British accent anymore for him.
Wow.
Like, which is something... It's so fascinating to me when I see a big performance forever influence the later performances of that character. Yeah. Well, because Star-Lord was also kind of that way. There's like versions of him in the comics where he wasn't surfer dude-ish. He was like kind of a straight-laced cop character. Because I remember in Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the animated show, that was before the Guardians movie had even come out. They got the dude who played fucking Master Chief to play him, and he plays it like Master Chief. Like, because that's
so funny. Well, he has to.
Yeah.
Like when you have that voice, so that's the thing about like a lot of stuff I see about like, you know, voice types, and when people go like, be a voice actor, and I'm just like, listen, sure. There's like, you know, if you have a very particular like quality of voice, then yeah, there could be a lot of those exact roles for you. But I find that it kind of pigeonholes you into just like, all right, well, I always do that then. It doesn't leave you anywhere to go because, you know, like the guy doing Master Chief just kind of sounds Master Chiefy.
Well, and there's things, I see stuff like that sometimes, and I always do wonder how some voice actors feel if they get typecast to that degree. Like, I do wonder sometimes how some of those people feel when they get stuck basically playing the same character over and over.
I think that's a good question. I'm very much the opposite. Like, again, like I've always marketed myself as and pushed myself to be a utility player of like, you know, be able to do like many things. But I do know people who like are kind of like one thing that they do. And I think that those people, the ones that I know who have like a healthy relationship with the industry, I think that those people are more than anyone else able to like seek their validation, self-worth, and joy outside of the industry. So those are people who, if they let it, if they got focused on just like, oh my God, I always get typecast as this, or I always end up as this, like, you know, like, oh, what is it? I'm so much more than that. What the fuck? That could spiral you pretty quick because you'd be like, let me be something else. Like famously, that happened to Peter Sellers. He resented that he kept being pushed to be the goofy clown from, you know, Pink Panther. he did not want to be Inspector Clouseau anymore. He wanted to, in fact, he walked off the production of the original Casino Royale movie because he thought he was going to be allowed to be playing James Bond, like as the books were written. And instead it was this weird sort of like, 60s comedic farce film. And they were essentially just like, oh, just do you think you could just like maybe like what if you just tried like a funny one just for us or whatever, and then like you'd sort of do a funny one and everybody would laugh. And
it's like
there's a fantastic documentary. There's a fantastic documentary about him, starring from Jeffrey Rush.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, I've heard of that movie.
It's a really good documentary, but it talks about that sort of frustration in his life where he was just like, I can be so much more. And he did get to play something. I don't know if you've ever seen Being There, which is a phenomenal film. And I recommend anybody listening to seek it out. But it's Peter Sellers. And it's a beautiful film. But he absolutely plays against his type. Like he plays a character that I'd never seen him play before. But I think, and it consumed him, that fear that he was only ever to be, like a clown and could not escape it, and that's all anybody wanted from him. That did consume him.
I remember Adam West talked about that. Like, he had talked about how he got so stuck because of the Batman character. People would only hire him in goofy shit. He wanted to do other things. And I think Leonard Nimoy was another big one where he literally wrote a book talking about how much he resented playing Spock for a period. And it's funny, I think he literally called I Am Not Spock. And then 20 years later, he had a lot of reevaluation of that character, and then he wrote another book.
He wrote another book saying I am Spock.
Yeah. It's so fascinating when I see things like that.
Absolutely, and I think it's a very common thing amongst actors that get typecast or get locked into legacy roles. And like I said, I know of a few people who always play a similar type of character. And I think that the people that I know who handle that in the most healthy ways are people who it either never occurred to them to be worried about that, or they've made such peace with it that they find their self-worth and their validation outside the industry. They don't seek it from the roles, because if the roles are always the same, you could spiral really hard and just be like, oh my goodness, like, is this all I am? They, have incredible, hobbies and extracurricular activities, and, they spend time with their family and they do all this other stuff. And it's like, and they're better performers for it, honestly. And so I think that's just my perspective as an outside viewer, and from what I've read and known about people that have gotten typecast and it's really sort of chewed them up inside, is that I think they really need to. The thing that will keep them grounded or sane is it can't come from the industry, and that's, I think, just good advice in general. But I think it's the grass is always greener, because I used to think if I had such an iconic voice, I'd be like, oh man, I'll work all the time, it'll be amazing. But then I'd probably get frustrated that, well, first of all, it's not guaranteed that you work all the time, but I would also probably get frustrated. I'd be like, oh, I could do other things though, and they'd be like, no, we need you to just do the gravelly protagonist man again.
Well, I remember Adam, the thing...
I can't wait to solve this mystery.
Yeah.
I'm going to find a way to do it.
Yeah, I remember Adam West, again, had talked about how his career after, the 60s, just nothing. He got in this horrible rut, and he basically got to a point where he got really upset that he couldn't get a lot of good work, because people only saw him as this one thing. And then The Simpsons happened, and then he was one of the first big guest stars on The Simpsons. And then that revived his career to a degree.
And then he was on Family Guy.
Well, he did Batman the Animated Series, and that was another big push to his career, which I still think that's one of my favorite performances of his entire career is on Batman the Animated Series.
It's a really good one. It's a really good one.
But he did Family Guy.
It's a fantastic performance on its own, but it's also a wonderful nod to the meta experience of oh yeah.
Well, he grew to accept his role in pop culture, which
totally.
Then when Family Guy happened, that just completely revived his entire career.
Oh, there we go.
He spent the rest of his career doing goofy shit. And he was really good at it. Like, because he knew that he was really good at it. Have you ever heard the story of how he got the role on Family Guy, actually?
No.
Oh, well, because Seth MacFarlane worked on Johnny Bravo, and Adam West was a recurring character on Johnny Bravo for a few episodes.
Okay.
And when he was creating Family Guy, he wanted Adam West to play the mayor, and he called him on the phone. And I think he said the moment I knew he was like perfect for the role of the mayor was I called him on the phone at like 9 o'clock at night one night and asked him if he wanted to play this character. And the first thing he said when I called him up was, I said, "Hey Adam, how you doing?" "Hey Seth, give me 5 seconds. I just have to feed my cat." He said that was the moment I knew he needed to play this character when I heard him.
Fantastic.
When that was the first thing he said to me when he answered the phone. Like, I don't know.
That's great.
It's always so
very Adam West.
Oh, it's
Adam
like
Westy.
the most Adam West thing that you could have heard. Like if Adam West answered the phone, that's the weird kind of thing you'd want him to say to you if he answered the phone. Like, but I guess the thing I was curious about, because you've done stuff for Marvel and the My Little Pony franchise, have you ever had a franchise or a character that you've always wanted to play?
Ooh. Yes, and there's only a very slim chance of it ever happening. I wanted to be a voice in the Venture Brothers.
Ooh.
Now,
that's very specific.
Well, the series is over, and then they had the movie to tie it up. And I mean, look, never say never say never. Who knows? I don't have any control over that, but like, I credit Venture Brothers for giving me the push to decide that I was really going to pursue voice acting. So I'd always liked it. I'd always thought that it could be something that could be fun. And then I saw that show, and that was a culmination of a number of years of watching those Adult Swim shows like C-Lab 2021, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, etc., and just being like, oh wow, animation and like voice acting can be fun and silly. And then seeing Venture Brothers and just going like, oh holy shit, this is so good. Like, this is like fantastic writing, incredible performances, and also like the kinds of performances that I can do and would do and liked doing. Like, like one actor doing, like 5 or 6 different characters and voices. I was just like, that's what I do. And so seeing that example, I was just like, oh, I think I got to go for it. Unfortunately, by the time that I sort of, started to come up to where, assuming it would even be that they would audition for outside voices, which they didn't really, unless it was like a guest spot. And that was often like a celebrity that they liked or knew. Or just them, Jackson Public and Doc Hammer. So I was like, and then the show got canceled, and I was very, very sad. But that would be one that I wish I could have been on, because, man, that show.
I've been needing to watch that show for a long time. I remember a few years ago, me and like a friend tried to watch it, and I think
it's a slow start, and I didn't realize it's a slow start.
I could not. We watched, I think, like the first 3 or 4 episodes, and we both were just like, I can't get the gauge on this show at all.
No. So I tried to show it to a friend of mine who's a performer and like loves cartoons and stuff, and I had in my head taken like most of, like the series I'd seen to that point.
You didn't realize the first season was such a slow burn.
I reckon it's like if you tried to go back and go like, hey, I really love this show called The Simpsons. Let's start from the beginning. Like what a gear shift that show goes through. But like Venture Brothers was the same. So I would honestly say probably the first half of the first season is slow going. And I think the reason it hooked me was because it was very much in the same way that C-Lab, specifically C-Lab, kind of hooked me in, was I was less like, oh, it's not in the cartoon style, but it's directly referencing Johnny Quest, and it's directly referencing like old serialized Saturday morning cartoons, but with a much darker, humorous bent. And I loved that. And so I think like aesthetically and thematically, I loved it. So I gave it more of a chance. And then once it picked up and like kind of found its feet, holy shit, it sprinted.
Oh no, I've had
really good.
I've had friends who've recommended it to me for years, and I just remember that first time me and my friend tried to watch it. We got to like the 4th episode, and we were just like, I can't gauge what the fuck this show's sense of humor is, or like anything.
Yeah.
Like it felt so like non-linear, I guess was like the best way to describe it, because like I think we just kind of dropped it because we were just like, I can't figure out this show. I guess.
The episode, and like it's early on, but the Gargantua one where they're on the space station, that is a bizarre episode.
That's where we stopped, because that was the episode where we were just like, I don't know what the fuck's going on, like at all.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff like that's very, it's all. I wouldn't say it's all over the place, but it does jump around in terms of like, you know, what's real, what's not, what's the past, what's the present, what's a hallucination, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's the specific episode I remember where we stopped, because I just remember by the end of it, me and him were just like, I don't know what the fuck this show is. Like, I don't think I can keep up with this if this is how the show's gonna be. And I've had so many friends who just tell me like, no, it gets so good. Like, but I'm just like, okay. Like, I've had shows before where like friends are telling me like, no, it's really good. Like, it gets really, really good. But it's always that little asterisk of that first season though. Is really rough. Like,
it's tricky. Well, and also like what is it? I do remember hearing that, and it still happens, I think, but it used to happen a lot back then, which is that they would often air things out of order. And depending on how the show had been designed, that would sometimes be fine. But sometimes you would feel lost because you'd be like, I feel like we should know these characters more than we do. The way that they're talking to each other and interacting and things like that. Like, this is kind of crazy. So I don't know if that was maybe a factor. Like, maybe I saw some stuff out of order and it actually worked, like, you know, in terms of pacing. But yeah, like some of the later stuff and some of the, I would say it's one of the ones, and I'm willing to give a show an entire season before I make a judgment. I mean, these days I'm a little less, you know, like willing to go all that way. Now, the one that I remember being suggested was The Walking Dead.
Oh, God.
A buddy of mine said, hey, man, like, I think he said, I might be exaggerating, but I think he said in the 3rd season, like, he's like, it starts to get really good. And I was just like, my friend, I'm going to tell you right now.
3 seasons is a lot.
I'm never making it to that 3rd season.
No, it's whenever anybody
I jump in at the 3rd season and then it's good, and then I just forget whatever happened, or it doesn't matter, in which case that's not a good show. Or I slog through 2 seasons of Drek.
I've always said, if my cutoff is usually, if I'm not into the show halfway through the first season, I'm probably not going to get into it.
That's a pretty good rule of thumb. And when I say Drek in terms of the show, I don't know, because I tapped out after a few episodes where I was like, but when somebody says it's going to be good in the 3rd season, I'm assuming that they are, what is being unsaid is that like, oh yeah, it sucks for 2 seasons. I watched probably a handful of episodes, not even half, like maybe 3 episodes into the 1st season of Walking Dead. And I was just like, there's not a lot of zombies and there's a lot of like soap opera drama happening, and I'm not really here for it.
I remember there was like there's a show called Ruby. It's like super popular, like web animated series. It's been around. It was around for years.
Oh, I've heard of that. Is that RWBY?
Yeah, I remember it was on Netflix at one point, and Netflix did this thing where they compiled all of the first season, because they're all short, they compiled all the first season into like 1 2-hour thing. So I was like, oh, I've heard this show's pretty good. And so I watched the first like season, which is like the 2 hours. I was like, that was dog shit. Like, what was that? And then I spoke to friends who were into RWBY, and they said, oh, no, once you get to like near the end of season 2 and like start of season 3, it gets really fucking good. I'm like, that first 2.5, that was 2 hours I'm not getting back, dude. Like,
yeah, no, I'm not into I'm not into slogging through. I think that also comes with like a little bit with age, and not in terms of like, I'm more mature now. It's just like, I just don't have the time. Like, not only do I not have the time because I have more responsibilities as an older adult, but also my time on this earth is more precious. So I'm not willing
What's
to
the thing?
go
I'm like,
all
I
the
don't
way
want to
through.
watch 4 hours of a show just to get to the good shit. Like,
yeah.
that's
Having said that, you really gotta give Venture Brothers.
I've told myself for a long time I might go back to it at some point, but I have to watch things with friends now. I have such ADD that like it depends. Sometimes I'll be able to sit down and watch a whole thing by myself. Like if it's like 40 episodes, I'll be able to watch the whole thing like maybe in like a couple weeks. And then some, but the majority of the time I like need a friend and we'll watch like 5 episodes a night or something like that. Cause if I don't do that, I'm never going to commit to it.
Honestly, that's how I used to watch Venture Brothers with my buddy. And I think that helped get through some of the slower stuff. When I sat down then, like we were just doing it in the cold, sober, hard light of day, I was trying to show it to him, and there was just this realization of just like, oh, this is a lot slower than I thought it would.
People always tell me, because like BoJack Horseman is like my favorite, one of my top 5 favorite shows of all time.
Great show.
That first season, I like the first season. But I would totally understand somebody not liking the first season, because that first season is so different from the rest of the show.
It is, and I think that that's something that's always been the case for television, and I think it's something that is sort of lost. Like I've been rewatching a bunch of shows recently. Well, not that recently, but like just rewatching a bunch of shows, like Sopranos, Boardwalk Empire, things like that. A lot of them HBO shows. And something that television just used to be the case in TV was that it was a lot slower to get started. And then once both the writers get comfortable, the showrunner gets comfortable, the actors get comfortable, and the audience is on board, is when you start seeing some really incredible television being made. And unfortunately, we live in a time, again, old man yells at cloud, we live in a time where both the people commissioning the TV, like streaming services, don't really give a shit about like how like long the show could run, because they go like, well, we're doing this to drive subscription sales, not aftermarket DVDs, not ad sales on tuning in on the broadcast network, etc. Like, that's not what we're here for. We're here to get you to subscribe to the thing. So you get 2 seasons. That's what you get. So just about the time that a show gets its feet under it and gets ready to go. Also, TV series are now 10 episodes instead of 22 or 15 like they used to be, which is insane to me because it's not enough time. It's not enough time to get through the growing pains, build the audience, grow the characters, and then go, let's go. So they just go like, you get 10 and then it better be the biggest hit in the world.
I've had shows that I can't even commit to because like once I see a show is like all the episodes are like 45 minutes to an hour, then I'm like, that's going to take so long to finish.
It will take so long. And I also now I am pre-ready to be disappointed. Like I will sometimes wait on a show because I'm not sure that if it's hour-long episodes, so like 10 episodes, hour-long each, and it's canceled after 2 seasons, I don't know if I want to watch it, because if I start to really love it partway through the second season, like I'm just like, hell yeah, and I know that it's already dead, that's gonna bum me out.
I have told myself for so long, I need to watch all of Breaking Bad. I've told myself that for years, and I watched the first season, and I really liked it from what I watched, but it was just there's like 45 more episodes of this, and they're all like an hour long.
I know, and then
like,
you know it's over. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Because I'm like, these are all like hour-long episodes. There's like 40 more of these. I can't commit to watching this, like, because it's so long.
Something I've enjoyed about, and it's so funny watching streaming services reinvent broadcast television. So they're now releasing them weekly, and they're also doing ad-supported tiers. And I'm just like, sooner or later, we're gonna get to where streaming services are just like, oh, now the programming is live, and I'm like, okay, so you just TV.
You're just doing TV.
Now.
Well, now there are some streaming services that are doing that.
Well, exactly. And the problem is that they've carved it out and gone, oh, hey, but all the things that made TV a lucrative industry for anybody except the channel itself, we've carved all that out. So there's bullshit residuals for streaming services. There's bullshit syndication for streaming services. Like, it all sucks now.
Time is a flat circle. It's just
well, this is even worse than a flat circle. This is a fucked up circle. Because they've gone, okay, so broadcast TV had all these things, and you could make a career. You could, once your show hit syndication, you were set for life, because now once it hits syndication, you've got, I think it's 100 episodes. Suddenly it can be sold as packages, globally, and you'll get a piece every time. Now, because it's a Netflix original only on Netflix, they're just like, well, we made it and we also distribute it, so we'll just pay you what we think it's worth, and we think it's worth $1. So there you go. So they've just done that. But the thing I really like about the weekly is that it makes me want the show. And then when I get either I notice that it's the day, or sometimes depending on the app, it'll remind you and go like, hey, there's a new episode. I'll be like, oh, exciting. The show that I like. There's another episode out. Yay.
Well, yeah, because I remember for the longest time, Netflix and Netflix still does this for the most part, where they do 13 episode packages or 8, and they'll just be like, all right, here's 8 episodes, go. I'm like, okay, cool. I finished the 8 episodes. Now I want more. And now I think Netflix is kind of starting to get that, because Max and Hulu and every other streaming service already got, hey, it's kind of a smart idea to release these weekly. Because you drive more attention.
You get a chance for people to talk about it. You get a chance to have people anticipate it. You can advertise it over a longer period, because you can have posters up that aren't defunct within 2 weeks because everybody binged it and now it's forgotten. So you can actually have posters up for months, because you're just going like, hey, that show, it's airing now. We're in season 7 of 10. Episode 7 of 10. And it's like, yeah, that's actually really good. Crazy how we've reinvented the wheel and come back to a wheel-based wheel.
I remember, was it that Delicious in Dungeon anime that came out last year? That shit ran 20 episodes every week. It was, I was shocked when Netflix did that.
There you go.
I was shocked when Netflix did that.
They finally figured out why that happened.
Wow, every time you guys ever release anime, you never release them weekly. Yeah. You release them in bulk. So I was shocked that they actually did the weekly release for that show.
Yeah, just drop it all, and then everybody binges the hell out of it.
And I kept seeing people talk about it. I kept seeing people talk about it the entire time it was on.
We'll get back there one day.
Well, it's I've had friends who've gotten cable again, because they were just like, I would rather just look at a TV guide and know when something is going to be on at this point, instead of looking at a streaming service and go, oh, well, that movie's only going to be here for 3 weeks anyway. So I would rather just wait for that shit to come on TV, because it'll probably come on TV sooner than it'll be on streaming.
Yeah.
Again, it's like I said, the entertainment industry is fickle. It's like I said.
Yeah, it really it's fickle and stubborn, and it has bad ADHD. It will chase any trend for longer than it should, and then it will immediately forget about that trend.
It has unhealthy ADHD.
I think the fickleness is very much you're absolutely nail on the head there. It's every time I see somebody kind of doom and gloom the latest thing that's going to happen, whether it be AI, whether it be, potential attempts at union busting by production companies in various spaces, I do just try to come back to the fact that, like, as fickle as the industry is and always has been and will continue to be, I just need to keep pretty rock solid on my reasons for being in the industry and doing what I do, because those aren't as fickle. I think there are people who join the industry in a bit of a fickle way, and I hope that they find like a genuine desire for it. But as long as you're not fickle about why you do it, then I tell people where they go like, oh, AI is going to take so many jobs. I think it'll take some, but I'm not quitting. I'm not going anywhere. You can't get rid of me. I'll be one of the last people doing a free play in the park because I want to and I have to. It might not pay well. I mean, if it's a free play in the park, it's not going to pay at all. Maybe someone will toss me a sandwich. But like that's how I have to sort of, like, honestly, I've said it so many times during this podcast. I think it's because I also need to hear it myself. As much as I'm telling other people, I'm absolutely talking to me right now. That, yeah, like, hey, stick with it. Remember why you do it, because as fickle as everything seems to be and can be, as long as you stay committed to why, as long as you're not fickle, you'll be okay.
I guess to wrap this up, and I know I know we've already answered the question, but we've been going about 3 hours now, which actually means I think you've now hit the record we've hit the record for the longest episode now. But I was gonna say because again, we've already answered the question, but I always ask this at the end to round things out: is what advice would you want to give to people who are interested in getting into the industry?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, no. We can sum it up real nice. So number one would be to find a way to perform. Now, whether that be a live stream that you do from home, whether that be a community theater group, depending on like where you live. I know that, not everybody lives in a small, medium, or large town or city. But if you can find any way, and then if it doesn't already exist, try to start it, because you won't be the only one who might be interested in doing some kind of performance. There's tons of free plays online and things that you can do that you could, if you want to start like a little group, whatever it takes. And it doesn't have to be like acting. Like, I know musicians who've then wanted to move into doing acting and voice acting and things like that. And I'm just like, well, you're already ahead of the game, because as a musician, you become a performer. That's the inherent skill that you need. So that's probably the biggest piece of advice. I would also say, it's very important to remember that it is acting with your voice. The acting is the first bit, so that's the key. That's why I say to get performance experience, because although it is voice acting first, voice second. Yeah, that'd probably be my best piece of advice. Seek out the groups and communities that do what it is that you want to do, and try to get involved. I know you know this, and you've probably said this to other folks, and other folks have talked about it as well. But there's so many forums, Discord communities, lots of online communities, communities on Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, where you can find people who are interested in doing what you want to do or already do what you want to do. And that's really, really valuable, because finding out that you're not the only one who wants to do this crazy thing that we do is really important. That's the first step in realizing that, yeah, it can be a job, it can be a career, it can be a hobby, it can be whatever you want it to be.